James, Scarlett, we go again.
Morning, mate. Welcome back. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm pretty damn good. I'm pretty damn good. I see that we are very unusually, for the first time ever, doing back-to-back guests. We'd like to address that first and foremost before we get into a bit of chat and then invite a guest on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's fair to say that last week's episode didn't please some people. And both our inboxes were blowing up with various people from the music press that were quite unhappy with us. So we talked quite at length, me and you, about whether or not to let this sort of slide for a few weeks and then address it, or to just strike while it's fresh in everyone's minds. It's fresh in the audience's minds and our minds. So we are, as you like to say, we are going to go again. So here we are.
Yeah, I mean, first off, couple of points to address right off the bat. This discussion was supposed to be in parts. That's why we called the first one Part 1, because we always thought there would be a Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. So this episode was always coming. It's coming a bit quicker because there's a couple of things to address. There was. First and foremost, the reaction to last week's pod was overwhelmingly positive. I mean, like 99.9% positive. The listenership, especially, enjoyed it and never really saw or heard the controversy. And if you look at the posts, they sort of speak to that. That's the proof. There was like no one, was not a single comment of anywhere that was a bit like, oh, that shouldn't have been said, or I don't agree with that, or any of that. It was very much a good conversation. Thought it was. Enjoyed it. Senior staffers at a couple of the big magazines raised points that they felt where there was any mention of sort of copy approval or ad buys influencing coverage or the amount of coverage you get. They pushed back now because they felt that they were the ones who were being associated it, sort of guilt by association, despite the fact there's a lot of magazines, like some Metal Hammer and Kerrang, were mentioned more often than anyone else because they are the big boys in our bubble. I mean, a bit of a Q or an NME or a fucking Revolver or the rest of these. Metal Hammer and Kerrang are the ones that we reference most in this podcast. So when things like copy approval or ad buys were being brought up, I didn't say it was those magazines. Actually, the exact quote was magazines X and Y, but they said it felt like they were getting thrown under the bus by the association to it because they were mentioned often. And I've been an editor in a newspaper. I'm going to get into that a lot more later when our guest Sam Coare comes on. I understand the point, and I went online to the busiest place we have, our group, and I made the clarification. In fact, I went a step further. No one asked me to apologise. I didn't need to apologise, but I said, right, okay, you know what? I've been in those shows before, and I've been accused of being a Labour show, and then a week later I've been a Tory show, and a week later I've been a SNP show, and then a week later I've been Green show. I get it. I worked at the Daily Record where you're accused of being, the entire fucking paper's accused of being the Daily Rebel, which means a Celtic sporting paper, and then next calls you're a Daily Ranger. So I get it, the feeling that, you know what, this isn't accurate and I'd like it addressed. So I felt that it was there was no harm in clarifying that, and then an apology, because I'm not here to be fucking Piers Morgan. I've been doing this now for, Jesus, 2 years, almost 2 hours a podcast. This is the first time I've really upset anyone, and it's, as much as I stand by pretty much everything I said, it's the way associated titles that they might not be involved in this at all, and secondly, you're annoying or hurting people that you're friendly with. I mean, a couple of occasions with these people I'm actually friends with, like I go to the pub and have a drink with. So that was a wee bit disheartening. But at the same time, as I explained in one of the emails back, I've got nothing to gain. There's no upside for me to come on and have this conversation. The same way there's no upside for me to come on and talk about gender balanced lineups. There's no upside for me to come on and talk about the cost of my festivals. But it's a conversation I'm on having. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to play the big mates game and just come on and, like, I feel like one of the issues we're going to get into later with this is everyone's a little too friendly and everyone's a little too incestuous, and it's leading to the problems that no malice intended, but it's leading to the problems that it's wall-to-wall positivity and it's switched off the readership for these magazines. So, that's all I've got to say in it, I mean, we will get to it. I mean, I know you felt a wee bit like you weren't in the conversation, but then you get dragged
Yeah.
along with it. So if you want to address that point.
Yeah, I do. I mean, because we kind of record these episodes and you're just like, you're in it. So you don't, it's quite hard to step back and think whilst you're talking or listening or interviewing or whatever. So I listened back to the episode and I was like, fuck me, I don't really say a lot in that. So my point wasn't covered. So it starts to look like your points and my points are one. It's like a podcast point. And I felt like my view hadn't really been represented, which is my own fault. So I just wanted to wind back and remind people that the intentions of that episode were good, because a number of times on old podcasts, you've had a little word about music journalism, and I've said, I want to get a journalist on to say, no, Gav, you're wrong, and then have a bit of a back and forth, get to the bottom of it, and provide something ultimately that is interesting and of value to the listener, to have like a two-way conversation. Now, I do think people really liked last week's episode, and I certainly always enjoy talking to Renfrey, whether it's on a podcast or in the pub. He's brilliant company, great to chat to. But with hindsight, Renfrey mostly agreeing with you wasn't really what I was trying to achieve, or what I think you were trying to achieve. And I can see why some people were a bit upset with us. So I just wanted to take 2 minutes to explain my thoughts on music journalism in 2026. Now, most of what you were saying and Renfrey was saying isn't something that I actually sit at home giving a great deal of thought to. Like, there's sort of two hats I've got here. One is a fan and one is a sort of work hat. And from the fan hat, I interact with these magazines, like mostly Kerrang and Metal Hammer, but others as well. Like, I'm 19 years old. I interact with them like I'm 19 years old. I want to find out what they said about my favourite new band. Is the new Ghost album any good? When's the next Metallica album out? And I'm genuinely excited. As we've talked about before, I've subscribed to Kerrang since I was about 12. I still subscribe to Metal Hammer. I still get whenever Kerrang does a print copy, I still get that through the door. So as a fan, I'm like fully in. Like, in the last week, I was on the Kerrang website reading the review of Converge and the review of Pussifer, and as Metal Hammer arrived through my door, I was like straight in. I want to know, what did they think of the new Carnival album, etc., etc., etc. Like, I think anyone that's listened to the podcast will know that what I'm saying here is true. Like, that is just, I'm like Mr. Fanboy still, and that's how I interact with those magazines, and I really value that. Now, as well as being a fan, I've got proper skin in the game from a professional standpoint. And in the past, again, on the podcast, I've talked about the fact that these magazines were instrumental in establishing 2000 Trees and Arctangent as players in the festival industry in the UK, like really important festivals in the UK. So via our press team with Matt and Hayley, and then into the mags, it has really established us, and it's established me as a professional. And like, I've been interviewed a lot of times, particularly in Kerrang, but also in Metal Hammer, and I'm not gonna lie, I love it. I get a massive kick out of it, and I think it helps people. It's not just fans; it's people in the industry going, "Oh, there's James Scarlett. He talks with authority, or he knows what he's doing, or those festivals are great." I feel like there is some immeasurable thing here where those magazines have been really important for Trees and ATG. Now, none of this is to say that I'm disagreeing with Gav or agreeing with Gav. It's just like, that's how I came to that episode last week on the professional and the fan part. And then I sort of just sat there and then woke up the next morning. I sat there and didn't say anything. I woke up the next morning and I've got like fucking people pissed off with us. And as soon as I realised that had happened, I was like, fuck's sake, I need to go and listen to this, and then I need to think through what I actually think about this. This is getting more serious than I want it to. And I was quite insistent this week on wanting somebody to come on. So I really wanted someone to come on. Someone who is, we'll give Sam his own introduction when he gets here, but someone who's sufficiently senior and has had lots of experience and can really talk about the other side in detail. So, we both said to each other we didn't want to go too deep on the intro because Sam's not here to hear what we're saying. So,
yeah,
that's kind of my basis of my feelings.
Yeah, I mean, kind of stop between the because you want to address to the listenership why we are going back in this again week after week. But at the same time, don't want to have Sam on and have spend the first fucking 10, 15 minutes of us talking about us. So, aye, that's what it is. Sam will be here, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, however long it takes to get through. But before it was important still to do what the podcast is, a wee bit of catching up. We've not mentioned the damnation. We've not mentioned the damnation announcement. I'll never mention anything about the trees announcement. So let's dive into that then. Give us some of your chat. What's been happening?
Well, I mean, the big thing that we haven't spoken about, as you said, is the 2,000 trees announcement. So I think next week we're going to give you some fucking waffle. You're going to get some waffle. But this week, the most important thing is to talk about the trees announcement and then the damnation one and then get Sam on. But in short, this is what we did. Funeral for a Friend of the Friday headliner. It's their second time at Trees. The last time was in 2013. Marmozets are back. Big one. Been working on that for months. A lot of people are super excited that Marmozets are back. Obviously, we've talked about Arcane Roots already, but just a reminder to everyone that they're doing a second special set of Trees that is in nowhere else set, in the forest, acoustic, proper, never to be repeated type thing. That would be fucking awesome. Mariachi El Bronx are coming. Have you ever heard Mariachi El Bronx?
Yes, I believe I saw them at Hellfest. It's a show.
Yeah. So they've never played Trees. The Bronx have played 4 times. So the whole deal was done like, let's get Mariachi El Bronx. I've tried it so many times, it never works out. I always have this view in my mind of Mariachi El Bronx in the sunshine on the main stage. So that's what we're going to do. I'm guaranteeing sunshine. They will be on the main stage. It'll be a fucking party. It'll be a big, smiley, fun time. There's a new album coming out this week. And the Bronx are back for their 4th go. They first played at Trees in 2014. Some of my favourite memories of Trees are the Bronx. I always describe them to people as they're like the AC/DC of hardcore. They're so easy to get into. So, like, I took my uncle to see them once. They're just fucking... They unite everyone, the Bronx do. They're so fun. I don't think they've ever played in the Axiomet Tree. So
what is it that you with them that makes it difficult to book? Is it because they really need to be in rehearsal space for it, the head space for it, or is it just did they bring extra players? What makes it difficult to book?
So when the Bronx are touring, I think it's 2 extra people. It might be 1 to get the mariachi thing going, and it's also different instruments. I imagine those instruments are a right pain in the arse to put on an aeroplane. There's some big old instruments in there. So I think that is a problem. And even this time, I think they're just coming in and out. They're just in for Trees and then they're gone. So it's like a kind of fly-in situation. And I always want them both together because, the Bronx is the 4th time in, what have we done? Like 15, 16 years. They played 4 of them. So, I love having the Bronx, but the thing I want is Mariachi El Bronx to play. I think it'll be cool, and let's hope they bring the Apple Bong for the 6 a.m. club. That'd be nice. So other biggish bands that are playing, biggish, not a very good sentence, is we'll talk more about them later, Military Gun, The Scratch, As Everything Unfolds, Petrol Girls are back, Dead Pioneers, I'm really excited about. If anyone doesn't know Dead Pioneers, they should go and have a listen. They're fucking great. We've got Anthony Green in The Forest. This gone down really well. I didn't know how well that would go down. So he's in a bunch of bands, well-loved bands, including Circus Survive and LS Dunes and a couple of others. That'll be fucking cool. Big Truck are playing, which is the new band from one of the guys from Soft Play. Recluse are playing, which is the new band from Dan P. Carter. And Vinny Caruana is playing, and he's also in Eye on the Avalanche and the Movie Life. So there's some cool little like side things, as there always are at Trees, that a lot of people probably don't realise that Big Truck, for instance, is the guy from Soft Play. So, or that Dan P. Carter's got a new band. So look, it feels good. One more big announcement to come. Tickets are currently the highest they've ever been, which feels great. So I'm fucking hyped for it. And just to just to mention one more time, because I like saying it out loud, ATG is still on a rocket ship to the fucking moon, an actual rocket ship. Like the sales are just, I was telling you privately this week, the sales are fucking ridiculous. The graph is laughable. We're having serious conversations about what is a sellout and when that looks like it's going to happen. Conversations that we've never had before. Because ATG's gone...
Field sorted for the tents. That's what I'm saying, get some more fields.
Yeah, ATG's gone from obviously... There was about 3,000 or 4,000 people there in the first year. And the capacity now is 12,000. So we've never had a conversation where we're like, fuck me, this is actually going to be full at those numbers. So, I mean, ATG has sold out, but a much lower capacity in the past. So that's fucking great. So I'm feeling really good about both festivals at the moment. Fucking.
So a few things then. Couple first on the trees announcement. People were saying Battlesnake ×3. Is that true? Or Battlesnake 3 times?
Mate, let me talk to you about my brother for a second here.
Okay.
So I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but there's a couple of people about to get thrown under the bus. So our process is I give Rob the artwork order. He does the artwork. Then I check it. And then I get the agents to approve it. But at the end, Mitch does a detailed check to make sure we haven't fucked anything up. So, and it's fiddly, as you know, and the more bands you've got, the more fiddly it is. And we've got a lot of bands on there. And basically what happened is Battlesnake moved from a text band to a logo band in the sort of artwork approval negotiation phase. And Rob didn't delete the text bit. So the Battlesnake are now, they are playing twice. They're not playing fucking 3 times. So, and I didn't even look at it again, I don't think. And I think Mitch missed it. Rob fucked it up. And between the 3 of us, it went out. And that's not even the worst thing, because the Bronx shared the wrong poster. So the Bronx shared the old poster, which was before all the arguments. So it's like if anyone wants to have a little game of what changed, you can go and compare the poster the Bronx shared with the actual poster, and you can see, oh, that band have got bigger, that band have got smaller, that logo's...
I mean, I'm not going to mention any of the names on the podcast, but there was one line in day 3 where they just sort of switched like they mirrored. They went the other direction, and I was like,
oh fuck yeah, I've forgotten about that. Yeah,
it was like the same logos, the same, but they'd went to the other side. It was that who goes to the right hand side, on the left hand side it would be. It was,
the whole left is bigger than right thing, but some like the middle, it's fucking utter bullshit.
It's even worse when you get people who go, I would prefer the middle. Like, how did that become part of the discussion? I mean,
yeah, you do. You definitely get the I prefer the middle brigade, but then everyone else is like, well, so
okay. And the headliner, and the headliner, the one still to come. That's a big question that people are going to be chasing you for until it's where are we with that?
We are nearly there.
Okay, good. You feel happy? You feel happy about it?
Basically, my plan would be, if people want to know when the announcements will be, I'm going to guess that there will be an announcement at the end of February for Arctangent. I mean, Arctangent booking is done. There's about 3 bands that are not confirmed but will confirm. So Arctangent's done. Trees is nearly done. There'll be definitely the final Arctangent announcement will be the end of February. And it's likely that the final Trees announcement will come shortly after that, probably the first week of March. There might be a few stragglers not done for Trees, we'll see. So I think that's the earliest we've ever got it all out, but who knows?
Okay. I mean, and just before I came on here, I looked a bit depressed when you first let us know, because I'm sitting here like, oh my God, I don't want to do this episode. It's because right before I came on, I'm sending you the link to come on to this Riverside studio. And the email before it was the headliner we've been chasing for. Finally, it was like, they can't do it this year. The timing doesn't work.
Oh, mate, I fucking hate those emails.
Can we extend it? Can we go for? Can we try and see if we make it for 2027? And you're just like, and at that point, I was a bit like, Saturday headliners moving in the right direction, Sunday headliner moving in the right direction. The build beneath it, obviously building nicely, and you're just like, oh no, and it's just like proper square one territory. I mean, it's like, so
it's so hard. It's so hard not to be square one, isn't it? Because
You can't
I'm
move
sure
forward
we've
with the rest of them. You can't put 5 headliners out for the Sunday. The other 4,
We've talked
that'll
about-
be the year that everybody confirms.
We've talked about this before. I suspect that a big festival like Download or Reading probably do have conversations where they're like, you are next in line, just so you know. If Oasis don't confirm, Arctic Monkeys were coming for you or whatever. But I don't feel that you can do that at our level. It doesn't really work that well.
The agents.
So yeah,
I mean, we've had conversations where we offer a decent sized band like a slot at Night of Salvation. They're like, but we're no big enough we're no good enough for the big party kind of thing. So I mean, imagine going to a band and saying, "Oh, by the way, we would love you as option B or C for our headliner."
Yeah.
So I mean, you try to be clever and have. I mean, a band like Health could headline. You know what I mean? It's like if you're just looking at raw ticket sales, a band like Health sell more. I mean, they sell the same amount as what Blood Incantation sold at the garage in advance in Glasgow for comparison. So did Health. Blood Incantation get announced to headline Damnation. No one would blink an eyelid at that, but how great they're going at the moment. So there is it's one of those ones where you like there is other irons in the fire, so to speak. But it was ideal because the genres worked for me as well. It was a bit like this is going to be a nice balance to the whole thing, and then I'm just a bit like shit. Now we need to go back to I'm just a bit gutted by it all.
How far down the list do we go until we go, fuck it, let's just get Mogwai?
Well, you and I both know what sort of money's involved now, which is strange because Mogwai, as you get this in your ears on Thursday the 12th, Mogwai are playing Paisley Town Hall. The Paisley Town Hall's entire capacity can only be, I don't know, 800-900 at absolute most, and the tickets are, I don't know, 25-30 quid. So they must actually go out on their own shows for very, very reasonable amounts of money. But maybe when it comes to festivals, they're a bit like, oh, well, we don't really fancy doing it. But how far down the list? I don't know what sort of reaction, because a wee bit of gatekeeping when the Health got announced, there was a bit of the old school were a bit like, oh, who's this and why are they here, and never realised they were so big. I mean, what do you think the reaction would be like for a Damnation crowd if Mogwai got announced to headline?
Was Mogwai, was Health a bit? Was it a mixed response?
I'm so used to Damnation fans being a bit like, okay, that black metal band Mayhem isn't for me, or that death metal band, the Dying Fetus, isn't really for me, but I completely understand and get and respect that wasn't quite there for the same old school that were a bit like, oh, Health. And there was a bit, you were getting some weird posts where like, I've listened to Health from Wilson and Forum and I prefer Wilson and Forum. You're like, who was asking for that comparison? Is like they're not clashing. They might not even be playing the same days. It was like there was a bit of that you don't often see with the Damnation fan base. Like no one would do that way. No one would do that way. I know even Perturbator. Weirdly, I would accept it. And a Dying Fetus or a Cattle Decapitation. You wouldn't. No one would say, "Oh, I listen to both these distinctly different bands, and I prefer the death metal band." So there was a wee bit of that, but then at the same time. One of those ones that proves the pudding, the ticket sales absolutely rocketed. And even when I said that they're like the ticket sales rocketed, there was a wee bit of like, oh, because of Wolves in the Phone Room or Eyes. And you're a bit like, I mean, they're great bands, that's why they're on the bill. But we've announced Wolves in the Phone Room twice before, once for a cancelled festival and once when they played Damnation. We've seen the level of the boost you get. This was something different. This was into a whole new, this was your. When you announce, I don't know, you like a Perturbator, I get it, like Perturbator, when you get into a different bubble. Orbit Culture are another example of that, where it's not like Orbit Culture are fucking a jazz band or doing classical music, but they reach a different space. There's a different fan base that are going to their shows that are a little less asking for Hellhammer or fucking Gorgoroth, and you see the boost when you get into that bubble, and Health take you there. And they're fucking great. I mean, like that announcement went down fantastic. Sales were better than we've had for a long time in terms of announcements, and it was only 3 bands that went out, so I was pretty chuffed with that.
Do you think part of the issue is? Do you remember I've talked about this in the past that we did an announcement for Arctangent one year where it was Meshuggah and Animals as leaders, and everyone was like, "Oh, if you don't like tech metal, then you think, oh no, Arctangent's going to be shit this year." But it's the first fucking announcement. They're playing on the same day. You've got 2 other days of headliners and sub-headliners. Yeah. You don't know yet. So eventually you get this rounded lineup and you fucking love it. And just like with Trees and ATG this year and now Damnation, it's just the order the bands come in is what the order they go out, isn't it? So at some point, you know, you'll have fucking, and I'm not going to name it. I was going to just make up a band name then, but you'll have someone
Butcher Killer's our house name. The pod house name is Butcher Killer if you just need a band just to get fired into a slot.
Yeah, exactly. So people will see Health underneath Butcher Killer and they won't. My mum's thinking, fuck me, is there a band called Butcher Killer? But it's, I know all the truth ones. Eventually people will be like, oh yeah, this is just a lineup. And I may or may not watch. I'm into Health or I'm not into Health, and it doesn't fucking matter because there's shit ton of bands to watch. So when you're early in the process or mid in the process, like even with Trees now, we're still a headliner short. People don't know the full picture. So
yeah. Well, my full picture was looking a bit more balanced about 25 minutes ago. Is based on the point I'm making. I see everyone who was a wee bit like, oh, I don't know Health or I'm not really my bag. This band that I had was definitely for their bag, and now there's no bag. So. Aye, a wee bit depressed with that, but otherwise, I mean, again, on Eyes, the first time Eyes were brought up to me, you love to take a bit of credit when it comes your way. Eyes were first suggested, mentioned, came across my radar via yourself. I think you mentioned them on here because you booked them and you put one of their songs on the record. Absolutely brilliant connection with the guy for LLNN. Really sort of hardcore version of LLNN. It's spicy, it's chaotic, done really, really well. Well chuffed to have those guys flying over for it. Will's Metronome and Health. So, I mean, if I was to guess, I'd suggest that two of those would be up your street anyway, Health and Eyes.
Oh, yeah. And I love Eyes and Health. I like their new album. It's really good. They released it on some mad date, like, I don't know, right at the end of December. So it didn't feature in any of the end of year lists. It was even too late for really us to consider it. But it's really good. They will it'll be a banging show. That will. Excellent. And I'm a fan of Walls in the Throne Room as well. So yeah, all three, bring it on.
Okay, well, it's going to be a busy wee year for you. I want to say quickly about, because the last couple of episodes have been a wee bit chaotic, and when you've got guests on, you can't really lean in on some of the stuff that we are trying to promote ourselves. We Lost the Sea tour, everything we wanted it to be, and a little bit more. Well done, Bristol. Round of applause for you guys. Fucking felt, you said it was the Thekla.
Yeah.
Sold out, completely sold out, 3 months in advance. I believe there is on less than 100 tickets for Nottingham. There is less than 100 tickets for Manchester. Glasgow slightly behind that, but still more than halfway sold out for Glasgow. And London will definitely be a busy old room. I hope the bands are as equally as impressed as everyone else about just how well this has been supported. Because, I mean, well, James, I have been on here singing the praises of We Lost the Sea since fucking day one, right? And I've been in your ear, and I've always had the opinion that they weren't getting the respect in the UK that they deserved. And you and I have booked them for fees that are not the equivalent of what a sold-out band at Thekla would get. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And they are now outselling most post-rock bands in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, surely outselling everyone bar the big three.
By the big boys, yeah.
Sure, because who's doing 400-500 tickets regionally? I mean, that's some serious numbers, and I mean, I don't know what's happening with Bristol, if it's staying there, if it's getting upgraded. Manchester's probably there's a conversation it could get upgraded, but I mean, I think they might just want the sold out. So get your tickets, basically, is what I'm saying. It's easy for a promoter to come on and sell you whatever, a dummy, and just tell you whatever they want to say. Because ultimately, the proof will be are tickets available or not. There's the fact you were warned. There's people now that will not be able to go to Bristol. There'll be people that will not be able to go to Nottingham and Manchester. Go now if you want to go to that tour. We Lost the Sea, Overhead to Albatross, Dim Skewer. It is going to be a belter. And I'm delighted. I'm actually over the moon. Honestly, when I saw that first one, I was like, what a... Because it's not about me, but at the same time, if they'd sold 50 tickets per room and everybody's like, fucking hell, mate, you sat and shouted on that podcast for 2 years about these guys being the biggest thing and greatest thing since sliced bread, and they came across and done what a local band would manage. Like, you're lucky you put them on the festivals, because anybody else who played, they wouldn't have got anything. And I was like validation was there that my belief in the band were right. So absolutely well chuffed about that.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to being approached to do our next tour. Now we've proven the worth of the podcast's sponsored tour.
And who is it? Was it Oranze Pazuzu? Fucking, what was the absolute hell package for? Yeah, David.
Is it Duel? Maybe
Duel, Inter Arma, Oranze Pazuzu, and Duel. Let's say manifest that package into being. So, great, absolutely over the moon. I check those sales every day, and it is weird too because I haven't been a local promoter for a long, long time. I haven't seen how sales go. Damnation works in a very strange way. Announcement, huge big spike, paydays, huge big spikes, and then in between it just feels like a fucking drought. The tour, for whatever reason, it just every single day there's just like a steady stream of sales for all the shows, which is really encouraging. You see, I don't know what I suppose it's the price difference. I mean, you might go and buy a ticket on a random Wednesday for a £22 gig, but you might not feel the same way about 160 quid festival. I suppose it's a big purchase when you go to the festival, and that's why the trend's different. But it's been interesting to see because it's been so long since I've done it.
Yeah, it's fucking great news, mate. Very happy about that.
Let's do ISO merch. Let's get the guys. Let the ad feeds up because I'm obviously not going to do them with Sam online. ISO merch is all about this week. Is all about Deftones. Deftones are in the UK. They are doing a sold out arena tour before they're even coming back to Scotland the same year and doing a show in August as well. So I am very much looking forward to seeing them. I mean, as excited as I've been a long time to see Deftones. It's just this, talking about a rocket ship to the moon, they've passed them and they're away to Mars. It's just been incredible to watch this band that we've gone and seen live for 20 plus years just reinvigorated like this, and just the sense of excitement and being part of a crowd where you're going to have so many people that are seeing them for the first time and that fresh energy. I'm really into it. The new album's great, and just I'm hugely into Deftones, and ISO merch, being the team that they are, spotted that enthusiasm and they've set up a Deftones store, a web store. I had a look the other night, 18 different tee designs, 5 different hoods, a jumper, and all sorts of the vinyl and CDs. You will see again for yourself when you go to these arenas. I guarantee these t-shirts are no less than £40, maybe £45, maybe £50 in some cases. You can get them for ISO merch at $18.99 before your discount. The hoods, $34.99 before your discount. The vinyl, everything you're going to get. I'm not talking about cheaper. I'm like half price or less. The time you put your Pod 15 into the checkout, you're going to get these. You can probably buy 3 t-shirts for the same price as you could go and get any of my merch at the arena. So go do that. If you feel like you're going to these, you've spent all the money to get to these arena shows and you just don't have an extra £100 to pick up 2 t-shirts, then don't. Go to ISO merch, and it's all official. It's all official merch. The money all goes back to Deftones and Deftones management anyway. It's just you're paying less for it, and you're not paying. I mean, if anyone wants to go back and listen to the great merch debate, you're not paying the 25-30% towards the concession that the venue's taking, or whatever charges are over and above that. So ISO merch, you're saving money. The band are still getting the money. You're getting the designs you want for a fraction of the price. isomerch.com, pod 10. It does it. If I say pod 15 now, it's pod 10, POD10 at checkout. Get off 10% off your order. Absolutely incredible site. They have, every time I check it, there is more stuff there. Go and give them a push.
Great stuff. So just quickly on the Patreon, I think there was a super sub, Siobhan Stobart, came out last week.
Yes.
Gav's very, very excited that it's directed at me for once. So Siobhan is a long-term ATG fan. She comes with her friends. Apparently they leave at 4 a.m. on the Wednesday morning in order to get there in time. It leaves them all a bit fucked. They've all bought VIP tickets. Would they be allowed access on the Tuesday evening to set up and prepared to go big straight away? So, I mean, everyone in my team is going to say no to this, Siobhan, apart from me. So I'm going to say yes. There's a couple of caveats to that. You are not allowed to enter the arena. It's a building site. They're building stages. You can come into the VIP car park and you can camp for the night. No random wandering. if security catch you random wandering, they will throw you out. When you arrive, do something like, say, James said, it will be fine. And then it will be fine.
When you picture first off, I want to say this is incredible use of the Jug of Joy.
It is.
And it ticks all the boxes the right way to do it, because you get something that money can't buy, right? Which is a great thing to do. It's achievable for us without levels and levels and levels of organisation or having to go and contact people to send stuff out. So it gets done quickly and it's innovative. I mean, it's fresh, it's interesting. I mean, for you not to set off at 4 a.m. with your bag packed, your car all packed and get down. And I've done that drive. I mean, I go from Glasgow. If you drive 7 hours to get there, you can be a bit bust by the time you get to Artangent. So what an incredible idea, Siobhan. Knocked that one out of the park. And not only that, first time ever, you get James Scarlett to actually take responsibility and read it. So it was like, man, of all the super stuff, you're the first person to ever get the big man interested enough to actually take the reins. So that's maybe a wee bit terrifying for someone who likes things planned. They need to go to a security guard and James says they'll be fine, but I'm sure it will be.
Yeah. Actually, probably better if you drop me a message on our socials. Sarah has actually set us up a Patreon email address, which we need to fucking start using, Gav.
Okay.
But Siobhan, if you drop me a message on one of our socials, I'll give you my email address and we can get it sorted properly so you can actually get in and get your wristbands when you arrive and it will all be official. The caveat is health and safety. If you get run over and die, I will be showing this in court saying it wasn't my fault, it was your fault. Health and safety is on you. It's a building site. But yeah, maybe we'll grab a beer together on the Tuesday evening.
Well, there
Lovely
you go.
Stuff.
A double bonus.
Before we invite Sam on, let's have a quick chat about our friend Lou, shall we?
Before we do that, we need to pick a super sub, James.
You've
just had an absolute cracker.
You've done this before, mate. You've done this before.
This is what happens. This is what happens when we let you do it. I've got here C. Kelly Edits. So if you are C. Kelly Edits, you're this week's super sub. Let's see if you can follow the brilliance of Siobhan's. Lou's Brews, James. What you can say about Lou's Brews? You can tell me something? No.
Well, I try not to talk about football this morning. I only ever think about football when I think about him, and it's not good timing for me. So I let Kit stay up until fucking 10 p.m. last night to watch the worst game of football I've ever fucking seen, and he went to bed crying. So okay, yeah,
obviously we got a time limit. We're allowed to never talk about football before the complaints start. So the only reason I know this game was on or mattered was the guy with the haircut. So I take it Man United didn't win.
No, they drew. United equalised in this 96th minute. But yeah, so the guy with the haircut, he can't have his haircut. Yeah, and Lou has already posted a photo of the guy this morning. Look, even though Man City is so incredibly successful in recent years, they still can't fucking get the chip off their shoulder about Man United. And they're watching us. They can see us coming. Anyway, being horrible to our sponsor Lou is not why we're here, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. This week he is finally set the alarm bells, the alert mess button, whatever it is you do. He has a new drop and it sounds like an absolute peach. Don't go bacon my heart. Bacon barbecue sauce. And you're like, that sounds amazing, but I'm vegan. Don't worry about it. It's also fucking vegan. The guy is that kind of legend. So don't go bacon my heart. Bacon barbecue sauce. I haven't had the pleasure of trying it yet. It sounds absolutely fucking delicious. I am looking forward to getting my next drop for the big man and trying that one. It's one of his ones. I've explained sometimes. He does collabs, and when he does collabs, the sauce is obviously a few quid more expensive because whoever's in partnership gets a cut of the money as well. When he does his own ones, he manages to keep them between that £4.50 to £5 mark. And this looks like it's one of his own ones. He's also got, anal vomits get bashed on this podcast, and rightly so, because you should not raw dog it. Do not put anal vomit anywhere near your mouth unless it's been filtered. That's not to say that it isn't a tasty sauce if you use it right. Now, it's $11.99 and he's got his anal vomit for the shite before Christmas down to $5.99, so almost half price. And the way you use it is a couple of spots in your pot of chilli or your curry, or anything, any one pot wonder where you want to get a bit of spice in it, a bit of real flavoursome spice, not just chucking some dried chilli flakes in it. That's how to use it. So grab yourself a bottle of the shite before Christmas and spice up one of your one pots. I don't recommend, unless you're a fucking nutter, firing on your sandwiches, because it burns and it continues to burn for a long time on the way in and the way out. So don't do that. I was at a meeting yesterday with Pins and Knuckles, two heroes, Shannon, who runs the company, and Ant, who's got the back end guy. And Shannon, when he was across, picked Ant a bottle of the Whitechapel barbecue bourbon sauce and took it back to South Africa for Ant. And we have a new disciple at the altar of Blues Brews. The problem is, I don't think he ships to South Africa. So Ant asked, is there any chance he could get a shipment out there? So if that's something we could do, Ant's more than willing to pay the shipping. I don't know what that would cost to get to South Africa, but if that's a favour we can do for the guys at Pins and Knuckles, then let's do it, Lou, and we'll get Ant sent out some other cracking sauces. If you live much closer than South Africa and you can get delivery to the UK, go and do it. Go get yourself a wee Don't Go Baking My Heart. Fire in that anal vomit to spice up your one pot wonders. There's still some Two Promoters One Pod, Two Promoters One Sauce in there. Get yourself a nice little haul of always favourites. And at checkout, pod 15% off your order. Can't ask for more than that.
Fuck yeah. Lovely.
Okay, so will we introduce the bold Sam Coare?
Let's do it.
Mr. Sam Coare, welcome to Two Promoters One Pod. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. As we said before you came on to explain to you, we have done a small sort of intro to explain why you're here. A second guest for us week on week is very unusual. So that bit's kind of been done. So why don't we start off with you explaining to the listeners who you are and your depth of experience in this industry?
All right. So I've been in and around music journalism for 20 years now. Not that I care to, show how old I am, maybe, but in that time I've kind of predominantly worked through the ranks at Kerrang. I was figuring this out the other day. I think I did every single job there other than reviews editor, up to being editor-in-chief there towards the end of 2018 through to 2022, when I then moved over to work as managing director at Alternative Press in the US, which was going through a big kind of relaunch of their brand at the time. And I worked there for a few years, and now I am, to use your terminology, a high attack, I suppose, as well as working in, consultancy across the music industry. I work with a lot of bands on some of the things that I suppose, maybe get your goat, in terms of like how to tell their stories, media training, those sorts of things. So, I feel like I've kind of seen it all from various different positions. And as I think a lot of people in my shoes and from my position listened to the podcast last week, quite interesting. It was shared in a hell of a lot of group chats that I'm in. And, I reached out to James, who I've known for a long time. We did a lot of work together with Art Tangent and Trees back in my Kerrang days. And, I reached out to kind of offer up, I suppose, some more of the fights back to the fights back billing. Because, a lot of what I listened to my experience, to my mind, just didn't ring true. And I feel that, I had maybe some context and some insight to offer into why things are the way that they are, how things can get better. I'm not going to sit here for however long we're sat here and sort of just tell you everything's sunshine and rainbows in the music journalism world, because I think there are areas it can be better. But a lot of what I have for a long time heard of people's complaints about the music press are, I think, kind of fundamentally misguided and untrue and unfair on a lot of my ilk. So, I thought it would make an interesting conversation for us to have a chat about those things.
I mean, right off the bat, that was definite. So I didn't touch on this earlier when there's something I wasn't aware of, which definitely I exacerbated, was there's a nerve there. There is a nerve of the perception of what goes on with music journalism that runs. I mean, I heard individually from 3 different, or 4, if you include yourself, senior staffers. To be fair, a lot of journalists, a lot of music journalists really enjoyed last week's podcast as well, and they publicly said so. I'm not going to name them, but they publicly said so. And then I heard the real anger was really the senior staffers, yourself included, and senior staffers at some of the major magazines. And there was a real depth. It was, do you know how much we need to put up with this shit all the time for, well, loonies, crazy people on the internet that assume everything, fucking Jeffrey Epstein's behind everything. It's like, and everything's paid for, and everything's bought, and everyone's a fucking hired shill. And then me mentioning something like copy approval, or in terms of paid partnership coverage, it was like, oh, you've just piled on this from like a more authoritative voice than you would get for Joe Blogs on the internet. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that sort of pain, anguish, hurt, the sort of like resentment there. And it was weird because actually when I put it to my own career, which I can talk about in a minute, I felt that daily too, where that I described to James, somebody would say I was a Tory shill, but in the next argument I'd be a Labour shill, and in the next argument I'd SNP shill. And like, obviously couldn't be all, but I understood. Part of the reason why I made the clarification so quickly, and an apology that I really feel that I didn't need to, but I wanted to, was I put myself in the shoes of the people who felt that they'd been aimed at in this, and I thought, I wouldn't like that either, and I'd like somebody who was out there having this conversation to make that clarification for me, and that's why I done it. I don't know if you've seen that clarification, Sam, but that's the reason why I never realised just how raw that nerve was, is basically what I'm trying to get at.
I think, look, I think it's, I think most of us have a very thick skin on things. It's it's something that has, like, a number of these things are conversations that are just so tired and so boring and so untrue. I think if anyone went and spent a day, a week, an hour in any of the offices of any of the major music titles, they would see a world that is completely different to the one that they imagine. And, I'm sure, like, you guys feel it as well as, like, promoters, like putting together a bill that you put together honestly and passionately because you feel that that's going to excite the audience. I'm sure that you get really fucking bored of, like, the Facebook comments going, oh, you've only booked this band for 2,000 trees because, like, they've paid to be on the bill, or this agent's in James is in his pocket, like, I don't know how you guys feel about that, whether you feel like you get that, I know that that's something obviously that, like, download, like, I know the guys that put together that festival incredibly well, and it's like, the idea of, like, how these things come together in any kind of, like, side of our industry. I think there's always going to be people who have completely insane opinions on some of these things, but I'm sure we all have to deal with it in our own ways.
Well, I think the parallel is that everyone forgets that there's real people at the other side of the person. It's me sat on my couch booking the bands. It's you writing the reviews in an office full of people that are really passionate about music and are only doing the job because they really love that particular corner of music that we found ourselves in. So there's a massive parallel there, and people online, the bigger Trees gets, the more we get that download element of people not understanding that even download is just like, it's just some normal, nice people.
Yeah, right.
In the back booking the bands, right? I mean, we all know them personally.
These things, there's far easier ways of making money than any of the things that we do. Like,
True.
If I just wanted to have a bigger house and earn more money, like, I could go and copyright for tech, anything like that, like, believe me, music journalism isn't, it's not the easiest industry to be in, as I'm sure, like, promotion isn't either.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to. What I'm going to do quickly is I'm conscious of the fact that you've got someone who knows you, Sam, and or people that know you that tune into this episode and have never heard of this podcast before. They'll have no idea who I am, no idea about this podcast, and then suddenly they're tuning in. We're having a discussion about journalism and thinking, why on earth am I listening to the Glaswegian guy who I can barely understand already telling me about journalism when he books Party Can in the Carcass? The reason why I'm part of the discussion and why I'm so passionate about this whole journalism as a whole although this for this podcast pertains to music journalism, it's because I 22 years of my life I was a news journalist. Finished school, got a HND in practical journalism, went to Dumfries, a local newspaper, spent 5 years down there when I was a trainee journalist, got my NCTJs in shorthand, law, public affairs, became a senior reporter, moved up to Paisley, joined a daily regional title. I was a senior reporter, then crime reporter, then chief reporter, and then in my later stages I was editor for 4 years. I have covered more murders, rapes, armed robberies, fatal accident inquiries, court cases than I care to remember. As a reporter, I won the Scottish New Journalist of the Year award. As an editor, I won UK Regional Newspaper of the Year award up against like a Liverpool Echo or the Manchester Evening News or Newcastle Chronicle. I was in charge of 1,240 editions of the paper when I was editor, and I loved it. It was my dream job, and then the COVID hit, and it was the worst job in the world. I went from having a staff where I would have conference each day, where you go and you talk about the day's news agenda at 11, and we would all bounce off each other and do the job I loved, and then I was sitting in this room trying to do it from this office, and my relationships all broke down. The job I loved, it became a job I hated. I left it and done damnation full time. So that's my background in journalism. That's why I care. That's why I've got some insight in it. And there was a comment made to me last week that it was hurtful, but it was a bit like, it's not the way I looked at it, that I had that conversation in bad faith, that I have got some vested interest in dragging down the music journalism. I don't see it like that at all. What I desperately want is these outlets to be have the influence they had 20 years ago. What I want is the people not to be getting on news or reviews from the guy who just is only interested in power metal. I want when Kerrang or Metal Hammer or Rock Sound or Revolver cover a damnation, that people are like, oh my God, let's put some stock in this and then go to that. And I also want my news. I want my news journalism from news journalists. And the topic we're getting here, I don't feel that happens. I don't feel that we get news journalism from music journalists. And you can push back now. I've got lots of examples where I feel like, why wasn't this story covered, that we can go through and talk about. But that's what I want more than anything. When we play Nazi or Nons, when our favourite guitarist when it just disappears with some cryptic message on Instagram, I want a music journalist to go and investigate and tell me why my favourite guitarist is no longer in my favourite band. I don't want to be left to just like speculation on the internet. And that's why I'm having this conversation. But before we get into some sort of scrapping with each other, can tell me this, can we find a common ground that I can trust you, Sam? What's your opinion of first person reviews?
Oh, I did like this is actually really interesting because Kerrang for a very long time, certainly under my charge, was we had a blanket rule that you couldn't write in the first person. Now, when I was there, we opened a New York office for the first time. And we had a team of 3 working out of New York, primarily so they could mirror some of the events that we'd launched in the UK, such as the K-Pit and the In Conversation events, but also so they could reach a bit more of a kind of local editorial arm as we were trying to build the US side of the audience of Kerrang. That office shut, like lots of things, because of COVID. But it was really interesting working with them because certainly in the US, there is a lot more of a acceptance, history, like even of writing in the first person. You know, a lot of that kind of, you know, even you read the big outlets in the US, Rolling Stone, your Revolvers, your Alt Presses, you know, all of those things, you will find a lot of first person writing just because that is a done thing in the US. And I don't really think it's a done thing over here. I think there's maybe some inherent Britishness maybe about that. But
Absolutely.
But no, like absolutely appalling. I didn't click on this link or open this magazine to read about you. I did this to read about the artist. So get out of the fucking way.
Okay. I also want, because you're going to there's a lot of things that I'm going to ask you about over the next however long we're talking. That's very specific to my view of journalism. Like, the problem maybe for me is that term. It's like, not like an accountant, not like a cop, not like a fucking kids football coach that something needs to be done for you to earn that title. You can wake up, doesn't matter if you're a war correspondent in Ukraine or you're waking up and you're doing your first music review for your fanzine. You get to call yourself a journalist. Now, I've got a cold definition of what journalism is. I mean, presenting fair and balanced facts that haven't been presented before to an audience. And maybe my issue with music journalism in the UK is I'm not getting the news that I want. And maybe your definition, that's not what they're there for. That is more of the feature writing. It is more of the incredible background stories. It is more of the incredible. I mean, every review that I read in these, they're well written. They're talented people. But maybe your opinion is that they're not there to go and find out what if the guitarist was a Nazi or not. They're there to tell you that the latest album was the best thing that's happened since sliced bread. So, I mean, what is the actual term journalist, when you put it to music? What's your feelings on it?
Well, I think that's a really interesting jumping off point for this conversation, because I think it's a question that the majority of music publications ask themselves on a month-by-month basis. You know, like, what is the purpose? You know, what are we serving here? What do the audience want? What does the data tell us the audience want? What is the audience quite literally telling us on email or in the comment section? What are they telling us that they want? And what's your role in that? And, you know, I think you are going to have a different perspective on that because you come from a hard news background. You know, you come from the very traditional sense of like what journalism is. And, you know, I think that the media landscape has changed so much in the past 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, even the past year, as really to make people ask the question of like, well, how are we relevant? Like, what can we deliver to the audience? What do they want, and what can we give them uniquely that is ours? And, you know, a lot of those decisions are informed by the data, because they have to be. You know, you're trying to build an audience, you're trying to connect with an audience, you're trying to build a business, you're trying to stay, you know, in business. And, you know, things like hard news, they can cut it when there is, you know, exclusivity there, when there's interest there, when there's an angle there. But, you know, all too often the return isn't there. And also in a world where, so, you know, any number of now social media accounts exist, where the democratization of media is now, you know, you can have your own views on whether you consider that to be a good thing or not. There's any number of news sources now. Like, you know, I can pick up my phone and open up Twitter, and as I did last night, and find dozens and dozens of different accounts of all sorts of different flavors, be they traditional media accounts through to reaction videos, through to YouTubers, podcasts, whatever, telling me that there is a new Knock Loose song with Denzel Curry on it. So in a world where that information is readily shared by countless different voices, where does that leave like traditional media and their voice? You know, what is the power that they have within that? And, you know, what's the unique thing that they can provide within that? So really that's like, when you ask sort of like the question of like, what is music journalism? What is journalism in this game? I think it's ever shifting. And I think the people who are still doing this for a living now, the organizations that are still there and still succeeding, thriving, surviving, are the ones that ask themselves that question more regularly than the others, and update their parameters, I suppose, for what that is, accordingly. But it's, you know, that's almost strikes to the heart of the conversation. You know, what is this? What do people want? What should you be providing them? And how do you find a balance between those things?
I am very conscious of, I could just sit and have this conversation with you for the next 7 hours and leave poor James there stranded in the middle. And that kind of what happened with Renfrey. So I'm very keen to get your input when you're ready to give it, James, and not talk over the top of you on this podcast.
No, look, I think it's clearly going to be a podcast that I'm going to speak less on. This is the, it's basically, this is the reason for this podcast exists, because you have an opinion about journalism, and we need somebody to give the other side of it, don't we?
Yeah.
So,
okay, well, by all means, please then just nudge in then if you feel like, because
I will.
More often than not, when Sam finishes talking, I'm going to have something to follow up on. So I don't want to get in a situation that you're 45 minutes in and be like, right, Gav, remember I co-host this podcast too. So, Sam, so your point of that, my argument back for you're right, there is more people doing that loose term of journalism, right? But we all go to the shops, we can all pick up cream, eggs, and a bit of salmon, right? But the chef's going to make you salmon and croûte, and everybody else is going to give you fucking a dog's dinner. That's my impression. Like, you and your colleagues have the talent, the skill, the wherewithal to put it together in a way that's going to tell you with better clarity, here's the story here, than you're getting someone with zero training and zero experience. I totally get where you're coming from. And you make a great point as well, that the payback for hard news takes time. And sometimes you go away in the hard news, you're trying to chase down a story and it gets absolutely nowhere. So at the end of the day, your journalist at one of these magazines is going, I've just done a fucking shift and got us nothing to add to a magazine, nothing is going to get us a single click. But that's when I'm coming up like, but that's also what separates us from people that aren't trained, because we're the only people that can do it and do it with some sort of justice, with that access that we can get to these people. So that's where I'm a bit like, if we had that, if you get some of these stories and you get them right, the clicks will follow because you're the only person who's going to be doing it right.
Yes and no. I'd love to think that was the case. It, from experience, would tell me that it simply doesn't ring true most of the time, unfortunately. I think that and I'm sure that like some of the other people who have been in charge at some of the bigger titles, I'm talking about your Kerrangs, your Metal Hammers, your Rock Sounds, like you put endless amount of legwork into producing newsworthy content exclusively, and within seconds it's everywhere. Now, does that mean that like you then shouldn't do that? No, of course not. Like, there is integrity, and there is, at the end of the day, the editorial quality is like something that you do this to have pride in. Like, that's why we get into this, is to provide good journalism and good material for audiences. But from a business perspective, that then becomes a challenge, like that, and finding the sweet spot, as I say, between what quality music journalism is. I mean, there should be quality across the board, but what that in-depth of reporting and that in-depth feature writing is, versus also what the audience desires. You have to find a balance between those things. Like, you don't want to go out every single night and eat at a high-class steak restaurant. Sometimes you want McDonald's. There's a hell of a lot of McDonald's out there to talk about things like lists and some of those things that like came up on the podcast last week as apparent markers of like low quality journalism in a way. I mean, I don't think those things are. I think they're just a different flavor of journalism to it. And a well put together magazine or a well put together website has a little bit of everything in there. It has that in-depth reporting and in-depth writing, and it has some of that, the nice clickable, shareable, more frivolous sides of things, I suppose.
Yeah, and honestly, I need to defend my it was an engagement trap that I did describe them as. And engagement traps are absolutely fine. It's like, what's your favourite Megadeth album? It's absolutely fine. It's like when it's that, but not the music story after it or before it as well. Like, okay, well, 3 engagement traps in a row when the music journalism isn't there is the issue that I have, rather than the engagement trap itself. Because I don't even see that as journalism. I just see that as more like, we know how algorithms work. These are proven to get engagement. Then the next article we put out, more people see it because of these. We've done it ourselves. Rotten engagement traps that we put out about whatever, top 10 cat cafes in fucking Paisley, that we're getting more traction in our... No, they don't. But that was one of the things that really put me off to the very end. It was like, again, rings true what you're saying. I've got my court reporter in there doing a week-long fatal accident inquiry, and again, I don't know the end of it, I don't know, 250,000 hits, but then we're doing something nonsense, just frivolous nonsense, and it's getting 500,000 hits, and you're like, And it's heartbreaking because you're a bit like, all the journalism's here, but the evidence is telling you this is what it is.
But you can still provide rigor and integrity and quality to the quote unquote frivolous nonsense. You know, the point is that, like, I don't think some of these things should be seen as like markers of like people not doing their jobs. You know, what it is ultimately, you're trying to excite people in this world, give them the information that they want in all manner of different ways. And you know, it's like when you're putting together a festival bill, like there's, you know, I'm sure that like to your heart of hearts, the Damnation Art Tangent 2000 Trees festival bill is like not exactly 100% how you would desire it to be every single year. Sometimes you have to go, yeah, you know what, we're going to book that band because that band is going to bring an audience, and that audience we can then turn them on to any number of the smaller, weirder, niche things down below, you know. But if no one is coming to the festival in the first place, then what's the point of putting it on?
You know, are you saying, Sam, that just going back to the sort of news point, or the sort of investigative news point, are you saying that there's two problems? One is if you do all the work and spend all the money, and then basically immediately the rest of the world nicks it and puts it on their site. And the second point is, and the second point is, it's not, there isn't actually the demand for it in terms of how much it costs. And that's where, when you mentioned the return on that, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically, you know, from a business perspective, and, you know, as I say, I've sat in various different chairs, and, you know, one of the chairs that I have sat in is the one that is ultimately responsible for the budget and, you know, the survival of the brand and of the title. You have to cut your cloth accordingly. You have to go like, okay, we have X amount of resource, X amount of manpower, X amount of budget, and we need to put it in the places that is going to be most impactful, most excite and interest the audience. And hard news is a difficult place to put that in, you know, like, and that this extends like far beyond music journalism. You know, look at the problems facing any single journalism outlet at the moment. Look at what happened to the Washington Post last week. You know, they shut. We're in the middle of the, not to get heavy on a music journalism podcast, we're in the middle of the war in Ukraine, and the Washington Post just shut its Ukraine office. Like, how wild is that? But do I think that should happen? No. Do I understand why that has happened? Someone is at the top of that looking at a spreadsheet and looking at the return and the budget and going, we spend X amount in this area and it doesn't contribute what X amount should return to the business. You know, like this, going back way to when, like, I remember the conversations around like circulation at a print magazine, for instance, right? And you would sit there with like your distributor who's in charge of like putting things in. So your distributor as a publication is the one that is going to like any number of these, going to Smith's, going to Tesco, Sainsbury's or whatever, and like deciding how many of those outlets are going to order and where they're going to stock them and things. The conversations are brutal in those sorts of things, because believe me, if like Tesco's are looking at a floor map and going like, what's the most high value return we can put on this floor space? Like, if they can sell more cans of Coca-Cola than they can magazines or newspapers, those things are coming off the shelves and Coca-Cola's going on those shelves. Like, you know, there has to be a business conversation to these things, as much as I wish there wasn't. You know, like, I wish music journalism was so pure that we could just turn up to work every day and go like, right, what do I love? Like, great, let's write that in the way that I want to write it and package it the way that I want to package it, and it doesn't matter whether anyone reads it or clicks it or buys it or whatever. Like, I wish it was that pure, but there has to be, unfortunately, there has to be a reality of a business behind those things. And that's what separates journalism from bloggers, I suppose. That's what professionalizes journalism in a way.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of some of the points that were flagged up in your initial email when you got in touch with us, so I feel like have you tackled sort of the confused, tired arguments? Or do you want to say a bit more on that?
I don't know. I mean, all I'll say on it, just for everyone who's listening, is like, no, people aren't paid for coverage. No, like, people aren't paid to give good reviews. Like, you know, all of these things that you just hear over and over and over again. Like, no,
Yeah, I mean,
like,
to be clear, Renfrey and I both make clear that you cannot pay to get a good review. That wasn't even an insinuation last week. But look, I have got a bit later on about paid partnership coverage. I have heard dozens of stories about if you buy enough space and you pay enough towards like any media or a media outlet, you can get more coverage. And that coverage in it might be that they do a feature on you, or they've got a wee bit at the back about your fucking mixtape or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get 9 out of 10 in your next album. Now, it might be that Metal Hammer and Kerrang have never get involved with any of that. That's fine. It seems copy approval. Maybe Metal Hammer and Kerrang have never shown a cover story, not once, to a manager and artist before that cover story. Now, if they're saying that, then that's fine. I accept that. But copy approval happens. Not only does it happen, I get more examples of it happening in the week since the last podcast. So I wasn't targeting. I have accepted that a lot of people were, the assumption was it was the bigger boys. But I'm saying copy approval happens. And you do get, even some of the blog sphere or the fanzine, you have people out there that are saying, give us £30 and we'll do we'll review your album. So these things happen. I'm not saying it happens at the bigger magazines.
I mean, there'll be bad faith actors in any industry that you go in. Like, you know, you come from a promoter's world. You know, I'm sure there are countless promoters out there who are, you know, when a band approaches them saying, can I get on this bill? They go, yeah, you can for 500 quid. Like, you can for
full of snakes,
you know,
full of snakes. Honestly, scumbags everywhere you look, Sam.
Every single industry has those things. I would say this without making this a great tangent to go on from the things that you want to talk about. I can understand to a degree why, to the uninitiated looking from the outside in, they may feel that is the case. When they pick up a magazine and they go, oh, this band's on the cover and they've got a great review and there's like 4 pages of advertising and a website takeover for these things. Like, I can see why, and I can see why people would connect the dots and go, they've paid for all of this thing. But actually, for me, that's one of like the fundamental misunderstandings of like how the industry works and how the business works, where actually the conversation is editorially led. You know, like, for instance, say, pick a band, Green Day, have a new record coming out. You know, that will land in the inboxes of editors months in advance. And there will be a joined up conversation between the magazine, the publicist, the label, the marketing team, all of these things on what do you think of this? And a publication will go, we like this record and we are going to support it. And these are the ways that we would like to support it. Like, we would like to put the band on the cover. You know, we believe as an editorial team that this is a good review. This is a good record. So we are going to give it a good review. And then the conversation comes on, how do you want to amplify those things? Like, you know, how can we make the most of that moment with things like marketing spend, with advertising, you know, like, but it is all editorially led. And people can believe that is true or not. Like, I don't mind.
But would you agree that even in good faith, and that is what, and I'm accepting everything you say, even in good faith, there is an investment in the journalism then in positivity. So, you know what I mean? This might be a 5 out of 5. Like, I would put my heart and soul in it. This is 5 out of 5. I'm the editor. But there's an investment, a cash investment in your positivity. So what you're saying is you're going to that label, management, whatever, saying, we fucking love this. We're giving this 5 out of 5. How can we amplify it, as you put it? Do you, I mean, that doesn't sound ideal.
But that, as long as that's coming from a good faith position, from an editorially led position, we are going
to... As the margins get tighter and tighter and people are losing their jobs and everything's a bit tougher, you're being in your own brain, you're being pressured into everything. You hope you start from, you open the record and you're like, fuck, I hope this is going to be a 5 out of 5. You're not even starting for a basis of, I have no skin in the game in this whatsoever. You open up a record, you want that to be good because the business model wants it to be good.
No, I mean, first and foremost, you open up the record and want it to be good because you are a fan of music. That's the reason that you are here. Like, I am a fan of Metallica. Like, I go into every Metallica record going, I hope this record's really fucking good. I'm also prepared to stand back and go, it's not really good. And, you know, are there fine margins between those things that you talk about? Yeah, but that's where it comes down to the integrity of the person and the integrity of the publication to not let those things cloud their judgment. And I think it is frustrating. And like I say, understandable that I think that people believe that one leads the other, but it is the other way around. You know, I can tell you from any number of the publications that I've worked on that like it is led that way.
Okay.
In my experience, and as I say, for the publications that I've worked for, am I saying that is like blanket across the board? No, because as you say, there are bad actors and there are snakes in every single industry that you go into.
Yeah, and there's people out there that they're putting the business before the integrity or looking at it from it. I mean, honestly, the people who be involved in some of these conversations that just aren't journalists. That they're from a marketing background or a digital background, or they aren't part of that. That is still their jobs on the line too, or their budget is. So you mentioned also reduced access, that you were frustrated by sort of reduced. Explain that a minute. I'm fascinated by this. Tell me a bit about what you mean by reduced access.
Well, I think in order to do I think all of the criticisms, I suppose, that like people have, all of this is like a two-way conversation, right? Like, you know, I think you mentioned on the pod last week of like, oh, you know, like, why doesn't so-and-so just pick up the phone and talk to the person and get the news headline that they want? Well, first and foremost, like, that has to be reciprocal. You know, someone wants to pick up the phone on the other end and to give that side of those things. And that's before you even get into a conversation around like exclusivity, you know, like who are they prepared to talk to, let alone whether they're prepared to talk to. But, you know, like, and I think, you know, I said to you on email as well, like, and as I said, leading up, you know, in this conversation, like, I'm not going to sit here and say like everything's absolutely fantastic. Like, there are many things that like frustrate me about music journalism that, you know, personally I would like to see better. And, you know, increasingly over recent time, for whatever multitude of reasons, like access becomes increasingly diminished. You know, like this picture that's behind me on the wall is a picture that from when I went on the road in Colombia with Metallica. That's a photo from the photographer Paul Harries. That was for a Kerrang cover story in 2016 around the Hardwired record.
And yes, James, we'll be circling back to talk about that story once we get through the journalism portion, okay?
Sure. So, you know, but that required 2 days of access to the biggest metal band in the world, like unfiltered, with many hours of interviews, many hours of photo shoots. Like, that requires an investment on the part of the artist and their team to want to give that kind of access to allow you to do your job the best that you can. Increasingly, that's hard to find nowadays for time reasons, for monetary reasons, for, you know, sheer will. You know, there are many bands that I know of who are like press darlings at the moment, who you would find on any number of magazine covers, who are there through gritted teeth because they don't want to do it. They don't want the hassle of doing it. Their manager doesn't want the hassle of organizing it, or maybe their manager doesn't see the value of doing it. So that is a challenge. Access is a real challenge, and to like do the job as best you can requires everyone to agree that it's going to require time, it's going to require access, and we are going to hand over, you know, we're going to hand over the power to the publication to then do what they want, to write what they want. Like, there's no control over those things. And in 2026, in the music industry, people like control. People like to control their own image. They like to control their own narrative, their own story. They have any multitude of tools now at their disposal to tell their stories themselves, create their own content, brand themselves in a very, very precise, very, very specific way, that magazines, where do they fit into the equation? Where do journalists fit into the equation who are coming from it from a perspective of their audience? You know, like, this is how we want to present the band to our audience because we know this is how it's going to excite them. So those, you know, it's an interesting relation. It's an ever increasingly interesting relationship that press has with artists. And you mentioned last week, one of the things that annoyed me the most, I think, was when you said the media's given up their power. Now, I don't think that's true on like two levels. One, the power was there historically because it was the only place to go. If you had a record out 30 years ago and you wanted to talk about it and promote it to the world, you had a handful of publications that you could go to who would help you along with that. You gave them access, and in return you handed over the keys, and you hoped that you got the kind of coverage that was supportive for you. Now that any of these publications don't have the power in that regard because the artist holds that power. It's not that like it's been given back. It's just that through the democratization, through the kind of like the sheer spread of any number of outlets that you can now utilize, let alone your own channels, that power is naturally diluted for everyone. This isn't just talking about music journalism. It's talking about any kind of journalism. It's talking about any kind of platform. You could talk about television. You could talk about the film industry. Like, you know, all of these things have seen their historic power diluted by the sheer volume of things.
I know, but as my old editor used to say, that news is only news if somebody doesn't want you to tell you. No, I mean, it's like it's about go and take it back. Go and get an interview. If you can't get an interview with the artist, go and get an interview with someone who knows the artist. Go and get keep hitting doors until somebody's door caves in, and then get it.
And I would say that I'd say one of two things. I would say that most music journalism, like, you know, a lot of publications do that. I would also say, without denigrating this entire conversation, we're not talking about like Watergate here. We're talking about the new Five Finger Death Punch record. Like, you know? Yes.
I mean, but like, let's move away from the chat as if we're talking about a live review or the music review. But I'm back into the news journalism side of it is like, there's plenty of, access to Metallica is the extreme example, and you were at the top of the tree and you got that chance to go and do that. That's great. But when you're, again, back to this, the latest band put some cryptic nonsense on Instagram, and it's changing the way that you, as a fan, as a ticket buyer, as a reader of the publication, are going to experience that band in the future, and you get investment in finding out why. There is access to that band. I mean, if you could argue now, like 30 years ago, it was almost impossible to get a band because you have to have a phone number. Or 20 years ago, you had to have an email. Now there's access to these bands and all members across fucking Instagram, TikTok. I mean, you can hit up these people a billion ways. And also, I feel like there's a wee bit in, because it's not the done practice in music journalism, or doesn't seem to be, there's a fear that, all right, we could upset, I don't know, a publicist or management or whatever, or they control the access for you, which is, again, that's not true. I mean, that they want it to be true. They want to tell you when you can get access and not. And like I covered football teams. I done a lot of sports journalism, and you could get access to a football player, but you burn the bridge, obviously, with the football club, and then you wouldn't be in the next press conference. Because a private business, you don't need to get access to the next Celtic Rangers St Mirren press conference. So you wouldn't do that, but they would make sure they play the game with you, and they would have a player and a manager available every Wednesday or Thursday, whenever it was, and you played the game with them. So you got access to the player, you got access to the manager to ask whatever you wanted, and they protected them players for people like me fucking contacting them on Facebook or whatever and chasing them. It's like, you just need to go and get it. It's the point I'm trying to make. It's like, I get it in 2026. It's a bit like, it's been so long since you've had these trips with Metallica where you've had that fucking unprecedented access that 10 years later it's a bit like, it seems like a distant dream and we're not making a bigger effort to just go and fucking get it.
No, I think there's a lot of like And I'm not sure how much of that is grounded in like reality, like, you know.
Well, like so for like forget Metallica, get any band in any situation again. The guitarist is left. We're no longer in speaking to him. He won't be in the next tour. What is stopping anyone from just going, right, I want to know why. I'm from Kerrang. Message, why is this the case? I'm not telling you. Let's go to the person who has get kicked out of the band. If you've got a grievance to say, let's go to the manager. At some point, you're going to get some sort of story. You're going to get what you want.
Sure, maybe, you know, maybe.
Well, you do that across 10 bands, 20 bands, 50 bands, whatever it takes. Well, I'm agreeing that sometimes you put the investment in these stories and they don't pay off for you. That is journalism, but it's this idea of I mean, reduced access. I mean, you're saying you disagree with that music journalism gave away the power. I mean, I've never been sitting in that office. Maybe they haven't. Maybe it's all been taken from them, and that's just the way it has to be. But you don't think there's any more fight to be had? There's any more like, you know what, we've got a say in this, and I'm a fucking grown ass talented adult, and I'm going to go and reach out, and I'm going to get this myself, whether you help me or not.
Well, of course there is, but then this comes back to the far bigger conversation of like, where are you going to put your time? Where are you going to put your resource? Guitarist A leaves band B. Sure, I could spend 10 hours trying to get someone to tell me why that happened. Now, that's working on the basis that they might want to talk to you, that it's not tied up in, you know, legal, contractual issues, which the majority of these things are. Okay, so I found that story. I'm going to write that story up. I'm going to put that in our publication on our website or wherever. No one reads it. Is that a worthwhile use of my time? Is that a worthwhile use of like, because the audience, the thing that increasingly more than ever now, you have so much data at your fingertips that tells you what your audience wants and what they don't want. And that allows you as a publisher, editor to make more informed decisions than ever about what your audience truly actually wants. And that helps you to cut your cloth accordingly and to put your resources, your people, your hours into the places that are actually of interest to your readership. Like, and why would you cover something that your readership tells you? That, you know, the data, the hard facts of the matter tell you, you're a facts man, Gav. Like, the hard facts of the matter tell you that your audience was not interested in this story. Why
I just kind of see a situation where would that ever, because that goes against everything that I see. So when these things happen with these bands and somebody drops out for some reason that you're not told and it's absolutely viral and it's shared and forwarded a billion times, I'm like, why on earth wouldn't someone click through to the story where the one publication's got the exclusive interview? It goes against everything I've ever experienced.
But first and foremost, you're working on the assumption that like people haven't tried to get that just because it doesn't exist. You know, it's like, so let's bring it round to your perspective. I'm sure there are countless times that James, you announce 2,000 Trees and someone goes, why have they booked them for a headliner? Why haven't they booked this band, this band, this band, or this band? And the assumption is that you haven't even tried. Right? You know,
sure.
there's
Sam, have they though? I mean, it's like I get what you're saying, and I want to be idealistic about it, but have they tried? I mean, was that your experience that people did try? Because I don't see much evidence of it.
You try for the things that you feel are the most interesting to you, like, and the most interesting to your audience. I can give you quite a very. I feel we're getting fixated on one very, very specific example that seems to have your goat around. Why? I just feel why more publications don't tell you the true story of why a band member leaves or whatever. Let me give you one example. Let me give you one very live, prescient example from this.
Yep.
When Fall Out Boy were on hiatus in the early 2010s or whatever, we at Kerrang found out they were going to come back before any of it was like announced or whatever, and it was actually a conversation. Kerrang had the exclusive of putting them on the cover, announcing their reunion. That was led from a conversation of us as journalists finding out that this was going to happen and going to their team and saying, we know this is going to happen, like, you know, how about we have a conversation as to round like how we announce this for you? And that led to...
That warms my heart a bit. I mean, like, it's just to be like, we're running a story. Do you want to comment? But if you got a chance to tie it in with something else, then fair. But well, I mean, it warms my heart.
You utilize the position that you can put. You know, you'll have done this before, Gav. Like, we have this piece of information. You go to the source and say, we have this piece of information. Like, I can just run this as it is, or I can use our position to get the
absolutely
interview, the photo shoot that I want. Like,
it warms my heart that's exactly what I'm after. And like, so you got that story, but then was that a successful story for you?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise you to learn that the return of Fallout Boy was a big story for Kerrang.
Well, there you go. Yeah, good bit of news. He's got a bit of journalism. You took it to him. You got what you wanted from it. And I'm using because it happens every 2 days with some band member, and you're a bit like the WhatsApp groups all go a game of Nazi or nonce because someone else has fucking disappeared for a band without any real explanation. I'm not fixated. It's just a very easy thing. I started Damnation Versus podcast on previously because I was reading Terrorizer, and I wanted to know something about Anil Nathrak. I was like, they had a cover feature on Anil Nathrak, and it was all very well written, and it was about the post-apocalyptic nature of the car park and how Dave Hunt's fucking history exams were going, and I was like, I was getting nothing in terms of any what I call tangible. I wanted to know something. Why aren't they playing live? If they are playing live, is it a fee issue? Or do they want to go? There was more I wanted from it. So I was like, fuck this. I'm going to start Damnation Versus, and I'm going to ask these questions. That's what I'm going to do. While the pandemic's happening, I'm just going to have conversations to stay myself from fucking climbing the walls. The very first one I done was with Vicky Hungerford from Bloodstock.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most prominent women behind the scenes in metal. And she was an excellent interview, engaging, and in the middle of it she says, I have received death threats for my bookings, which to me was like, fucking hell. I mean, geez, that came out of nowhere. An amazing newsline in a time when we're talking about misogyny in music, we're talking about sexism, and here's one of the most prominent women in the industry saying she gets death threats because people don't like her bookings. I took that newsline to a friend of mine and his editor and said, have at it. It's all there. It's like, who doesn't want that news story? I mean, the one thing I don't need to explain to me is what makes a news story. And it was like, not condescendingly, but very much like, I will have a look at it. And then nothing else happened. And then the next list of Linkin Park's top 5 tracks ranked came out instead. And you're like, help me understand, Sam. Help me understand why, when that's presented to you, that's not of interest to a news journalist.
I mean, I would say that's just a bad decision.
Okay. And that's one of my examples.
I would just say that is just a poor decision that was made in that time by that person on that publication.
This forms my views on. And listen, see if I thought that the news journalists, the higher tax, as you're saying, see if I thought they were talentless and had no idea what was going on, I'd have no beef with this whatsoever. I would just be like, aye, okay, it's like fucking the Reform Party. They're just not good at it. And just that I'd move on with my life. But I think you're talented. I think you're better feature writers than I would ever be. That's my beef is, I want to see it stronger. I think you're fucking great at this, but I want my news too.
I think
that's fine.
The interesting point here...
I would... Sorry, go on, James.
No, you go.
No, I was just going to say, and that's totally fine. And what every single person that makes up an audience desires of any publication is going to differ. The decisions that you have to make as the person that is running that publication is to look at the audience as a whole, what they are telling you that they want, and what they're telling you, as I say, in multiple different, through data or through, word of mouth. And you have to make those decisions. And what you may want out of a publication is not what the rest of the audience wants. Like, I'm presuming I'm making a not particularly big leap of faith here to guess that the 3 people on this call are over the age of 40. Right?
Just
so what? So let's not mistake what we want for what the audience of any of these publications wants. And your job as certainly as an editor, is to stand back and to make a decision that based on what your audience desires. I always used to joke that like the version of Kerrang that I would make, if I was making it for me, there's only so many times a year you can put Guns N' Roses on the cover. You know, like you're putting together a publication for the audience and what you think they are interested in. Do people get that wrong sometimes? Absolutely. But you do it in good faith. You do it from a position of, we know our audience, we know what the data tells us, and these are the things that we think they are going to be interested in, excited by, want to know. And then you put that together to the best of your abilities.
We're obviously we all live in a sort of social media echo chamber where we see what we see and we think it's bigger news than it is because it's just our corner of it. But the one, just following on from what Gav was talking about with Bloodstock, I think a bigger, more commercial thing that's happened in the last few years is what happened last year with Kneecap. And I think, and I'd be interested in your perspective on that, Sam, because that wasn't covered at all I think it's true to say that wasn't covered at all by any of the rock press. You know, their headline in 2000 Trees, huge amount of controversy. And we were on BBC, we were on Sky News, Kneecap and 2000 Trees. Now, I don't know if it was because it was too controversial to cover but it feels like that's... I'm not actually here to give Gav's point, but in that instance, that does seem a bit baffling that wasn't covered.
Would I have covered that? Probably. I'd have certainly had a conversation with you to say, will you talk about this? You know, what does this mean for the festival? Whether you then... Okay, that's an interesting example. Would I have done that differently? Yes, but then, you know, I'm a different editor to any number of editors out there. Like, there are things that I would do or things that I wouldn't do that, you know, any other person would make a different decision on. From your point of view, James, if one of those publications had come to you and said, can we interview, can you go on the record about booking this band for this festival? Why did you book this band for this festival? Do you stand behind this booking and the things that they stand for, that they say on stage? Would you have granted that interview?
Well, we did talk about it on here, so I was prepared to talk about it. Okay. No one asked me. I don't think anyone asked to talk about it. It's much easier to do it here because it's controlled, and I know I can edit it if it goes wrong. We never edit this podcast, but if it was really, because that was like a kind of scary, dangerous time, and yeah, I think I would have spoken to someone that I thought I could trust. You know, I know a lot of people in the UK music press now, and some of them I do definitely trust. But it was a big issue for us, a big thing of not to say the wrong thing and not to get embroiled necessarily in the politics. But I guess I'm not really criticising, let's say for argument's sake, Kerrang for not covering that, but it feels like that is an interesting part of what Gav's saying, is that, okay, the guitarist of a hardcore band just left is one thing, but that was like national news.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is an interesting thing that should it have been covered more? Probably. But that's also not to say that like those publications didn't have the conversation around like, should we cover this? Is this of interest? How do we cover this in a way that is interesting to the audience? What authority, what voices can we bring to those things? I don't know. Like I say, it's been a couple of years since I was in the chair to make those decisions.
And can I just say, actually, before you go, Gav, I don't actually recall whether I had interviews requested, so I'm worried that there's journalists out here somewhere thinking he turned us down.
James, you had a BBC radio request, and they wanted you to go in and then have a across the table conversation with a local MP that felt the other way, but you didn't want to do because you're a bit like, I don't want to be fucking. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your livelihood in the line. It's not your responsibility to go and do the journalism for BBC either, but it's like, not only were you on the record, you were on the record at length via this podcast, and Renfrey makes a really great point last week, is the publications don't really value what comes from a podcast like this, or don't see it as a news source. I mean, for that Vicky Hungerford story is like on a plate, an example of that. But then we've got a kneecap situation where you've got reams. I mean, I would have ran 10 stories off that kneecap, or the interviews done, and I'd have reached out to you and we'd have done it exclusively that way as well. The worst scenario in that was, I want to give a shout out to a journalist called Emma Wilkes, who did do a piece on the kneecap bit for NME, and that I read this week. So it wasn't true that none of the UK music president. Emma Wilkes did a piece for NME, which was, she done well. She gave a bit of context, and it wasn't just a case of just, here's a press release and slapped it on. So fair play to Emma Wilkes on that situation. The one that was even worse for me than the kneecap was all the kneecap thing had happened. It was the top news story in the UK by some distance forever. It was the ticker on Sky News and the BBC, and they were covering it all the time. Then Bob Villan pulled out a rock festival called Radar in Manchester, and it kicked off again because he went deaf to the IDF at Glastonbury, which had been a massive story, and it was left so wide open. This isn't even a surprise to me at the time, but it was left so wide open that the only outlet that covered it at all was Two Promoters One Pod. And then from that, our copy or our interview was ripped off mercilessly by Billboard, BBC, Sky News, Far Out magazine. I mean, it went everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Another example of when the music press of the UK didn't touch it either for their own volition or even just following up for us, which in my head is just, it makes no sense whatsoever. It's the biggest news story of the day, gets you more clicks than anything else you're going to do. There's nothing you're putting out that's getting you more interest. Our podcast tripled in download numbers because we had Catherine for Radar One, and it was the only outlet doing it. Like, we're not even trying to be a journalism podcast, and we shouldn't be scooping the music press, is a point I'm getting it to. Again, you weren't in the seat at the time, Sam, so it's no fair for you to be like, but why did you not cover it? But you're in consultancy, you have got a great depth of experience. How have we got to the situation where people feel that the kneecap situation or the Bob Villan situation isn't worth the time and effort?
I don't think it's about whether it's worth the time and the effort. You know, I think it's interesting, first and foremost, that you say that you agreed with Renfrew's point that no one uses podcasts as a news source, and then 2 minutes later say that your podcast yielded all manner of publications ripping off a news story.
Fair play.
Journalism
on
that
one.
But again, you have to look at and this is separate to the specific instances that you talk about there, because would I have made different decisions if it was up to me? Very probably. Like, I can't say definitively. I can't go back in time and say yes, but would like to think that I would have. But it comes back to the point of like, where are you going to put your resource? What does your audience want? And what can you bring to the conversation? Like, if that story has been done really well somewhere else, that they've got the access, the exclusive, the thing on that, then sometimes you have to look at it and go, our time is better spent on doing something that our audience wants, that hasn't been catered for. Because you can't do everything. Like, the teams at these publications now are so incredibly small, right? I think there are 3 people full-time at Kerrang nowadays. Like, in a world awash with stories, with artists, with any number of things to write about. And you have to make some decisions on those things. And do I agree with all of those decisions? No. But I understand where, like, those decisions come from. And do people get them wrong? Sure. But, like, the thing that I think frustrates me in the conversation is when there's no consideration to those decisions being made with any kind of purity. Like, you know,
I think we need to move on. I think we need to move on for that point a bit, because I feel like it's been addressed and that no one's questioning the purity at this point. It was like clarification was made. No one's suggesting that money's been changing hands so that Kerrang and Metal Hammer don't cover Kneecap. Nobody, and that we need to know everything can come back to the fact that there was some sort of association with it in a 2-hour conversation last week.
That's not what I'm coming back to. What I'm coming back to is like the idea of like, okay, why was that Kneecap story not covered more in the rock press? I don't know. Like, maybe those people just looked at what their audience wanted, what they were already committed to, time-wise, budget-wise, all of these things, and decided we can't cover that to the depth and to the and in a way that it requires to be done. Because you've only got so many hours, so much resource. This isn't me sitting here going like making excuses for decisions I didn't make. I'm just trying to
of course.
that, like you can't sit there and cover literally everything. You have to make some decisions.
But from the point in editor, we've both been sitting in editors' chairs. What I would say is everything else gets fucking canned right now. Forget it. Forget whatever you're writing about that feature or whatever. We're doing the Bob Villan story. We're doing the Kneecap story. It's the biggest news story in the UK. And if we can find a way, another angle into it, give us a fresh line, brilliant. Excellent. That's the dream. If we just need to present the facts, then we present the facts. And these are the facts as we have them. That's my view as a reporter, as an editor. And it feels like you would share the same view, that if you were sitting in the hot seat at that time, that you would have went, well, the Kneecap or the Bob Villan situation is something that deserves coverage. So whatever you're doing with the limited resources is, we need to stop that and start doing this.
Yeah, but is there not an element, Sam, that, I mean, because obviously if you're in the Guardian's newsroom, you're not thinking, oh, you can't be asked to cover this story because it's going to cause us a world of pain. It's like we go out there and we create the fucking news, and we've got teams of lawyers to deal with the pain. There must be an element of like, we don't know why any of the rock press made the decision not to cover that story, but that is a thing to cover, isn't it? Which is going to bring a huge amount of heat on your 3-person office or your 5-person office. Do you not think there's an element of that in this?
Yeah, like, as I say, I can't go back and say why those decisions were made or like whatever, you know, it's just that those are clearly the decisions that were made. And it was, I would like to think, thought through and discussed, and it was decided on any of these publications that, like, for whatever reason, the resources were going to be put into something else.
But it strikes me the difference between Gav on the one side and the UK music journalists on the other side. The difference, in part, is what Gav considers to be newsworthy for those publications, and what the publications consider to be newsworthy, and that is just a difference of like, yeah, I mean, it might be to do with a lot of financials and a lot of spreadsheets, and various editorial decisions, but it's just a difference of you're not seeing it from the same.
And I think it also strikes to Gav's hard news background. You know, like to Gav, clearly, like breaking news is the be all and end all. Like that's what you are there to do in journalism. You know, there are any of these publications probably have different perspectives on the value of news to them versus the value, you know, what the other things that they would value. For instance, Rock Sound doesn't review records. They made that decision 10 years ago, maybe, to stop like a reviews section. You could sit and debate the merits of that all day. Like, you know, surely like reviewing music is the bread and butter of a music journalist. But they decided that their brand of journalism, what their audience wanted, was not based around tell me whether this music's any good. It was based around probably access, talking to artists, interviewing them. That's where they wanted to put their time and effort and resource. And you know, the conversation around what is news, what is the value of news, is going to be, you're going to come up with different answers at any different publication that you get.
Okay, so to move away from that, I don't want the whole thing to be in this the news or hard news or how it's delivered. I feel like we've made the point there that there's stories that we felt should have been covered by that haven't been, and you've done the very best you can do, considering you weren't in the room when those conversations were being made. So it's a wee bit unfair in you, but we appreciate you having a stab at it from the experience you have. A criticism that I feel was pretty universal, and you can see it from the feedback on last week's podcast, is there is a feeling that positivity reigns supreme at magazines these days. There isn't the same level of like Ian Winwood's absolutely smashing Marilyn Manson 20 years ago that you get now. I didn't know if that was completely true or not, so I spent hours. What's the best example of how I can objectively look at what these magazines have done? So what I've done is I took Kerrang and Metal Hammer, the two big boys of our scene. I took Download, the big festival of our scene, and I took their headliners, the biggest bands of our scene, and I went back through 25, 24, 23 and 22, and each of the headliners I got their latest album. So there was no way for me to configure it or skew it to my argument at any point of view. It was just the way, right? Bear with me with this one, because I did spend a lot of time in it. This is the scores that all these recent albums got for all the headliners in the last 4 years, right? Korn, Requiem, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Sleep Token, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Green Day, Saviours, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Queens of the Stone Age and New Times Roman, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Avenged Sevenfold, Life is But a Dream, 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. Fall Out Boy, So Much for Stardust, 4 out of 5. Bizarrely, no review on Metal Hammer, so if I've missed that, please somebody flag up me. I could not find it. Metallica, 72 Seasons, 4 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5. Slipknot at the end so far, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Bring Me Horizon, Posthuman, 4 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5. Then back to 22. Biffy Clyro, Futique, 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. Iron Maiden, Senjutsu, 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. Kiss, now this was a wee bit down because Kiss hadn't released an album since 2012, but Metal Hammer, 4 out of 5. Kerrang, no review. So of the headliners of Download for the last 4 years, all 12, not one score beneath 3.5. Some of them near perfect, all of them great. Every single record that was released. Different writers, well written, talented, across titles, because different years, different periods from the magazines. No suggestion at all that any of this bought, paid for, influenced. However, the scores are the scores. Almost universally 4 out of 5 for every album released. Has there some sort of positivity seeped into the album review scene, or do you think that's purely coincidental that every single album a big band released was hugely positive?
I don't think it's like coincidental. I think ultimately what you're seeing there is a question of, generally the people who are motivated to review a record, who put themselves forward for, I would like to review that record, are generally coming from a position of like, I like this band. So you are probably seeing positivity creep in there because the person that is reviewing it is like condition. That's not the right word, but let's roll with it for the sake of me trying to come up.
Do you feel that's a fair way to distribute album? So if you give the Slipknot album to the Slipknot fan, you give the Iron Maiden album to the Iron Maiden fan.
Well, you've got a difficult balance in that, because you also want to give it to someone who can contextualize that record the best that they can. There's no point giving the new Iron Maiden record to someone who doesn't
an 80-year-old hardcore fan.
You can't place that record within the greater Iron Maiden canon. And then naturally the people who are going to know that material and that discography is at its best are probably the people who like Iron Maiden and have lived through that discography. So I think it's a catch-22, because like that is no more bad faith than someone putting their hand up and saying, I want to review the Sleep Token record because I don't like Sleep Token. So it's like, do I think that is like a great way of doing it? No, but then I don't know how anything can be expected to be different. You know, like you're either going to like a band or dislike a band, and at the moment, you know, the way things are, I think you are inevitably going to choose to read, or you're going to read reviews written by people who are coming from a position of liking a band. That will bring with it certain likes.
Is it scary if you're the editor of a magazine to give Iron Maiden 2 out of 5 for that new album? Is that like something that is like, fuck, this is a big deal for what I'm doing here?
I've in my time of editing Kerrang, I didn't know Iron Maiden to make a 2 out of 5 record. So I don't know. Like,
well, we could go into Senjutsu in a bit more detail, I guess.
Sure.
But
you don't like Senjutsu, sure.
I'm not giving it a 4. I'm not giving it a 2 either. But
I think that the Last Avenged Sevenfold record was bafflingly terrible. But
Sam, would you agree? Like, so these scores, I mean, probably no one's ever thought about it like that, or no one's ever had it presented like that. But do you feel there's a damage when, like, all 12 headliners all get 4 out of 5 from one magazine, that there's a numbness that you can become a bit numb to? I mean, almost like you feel like, oh, I'll go to the next 3 headliners, I'm going to get 4 out of 5 again. And again, this is not, there's something not working with the system if everything's great. I mean, and everything's like, we've all got different points of view. You thought the Avenged Sevenfold album was crap. James didn't like the Iron Maiden record. There's no way in the world I thought that the latest Korn record was near perfect. It's like, is that a problem? I mean, so, because it seems to be that the fan base, the listenership, the readers have got a wee bit numb to the positivity that's there, that when Matt Mills does write a 2 out of 5 piece for The Guardian, saying why it wasn't the best download ever, he's getting people online saying you weren't even there. You're a fucking idiot. What are you talking about? It's like, it's just so shocking to people now to read something that isn't glowingly positive, that's its own problem.
I don't know. Like, I'm trying to sort of remind me what your question or point was.
So if everything's great, then nothing's great, is my point. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing a situation where everything here, from the big boys at the big festival, is everything's great.
I don't think it's anything more of a problem than everything being shit. And I think it would be the idea that, like, positivity, and this isn't your point, this is a broader point that I'm making. The idea that positivity can be done in bad faith versus negativity. It's just not true. Like, you know, I think that one of my favorite pieces of writing last year from a review perspective was someone took the last Sleep Token record to task. I can't remember who it was. I think it was someone that used to run Revolver and then left, and they wrote it for somewhere else. I'd have to dig it out. I don't really have an opinion on Sleep Token. Like, it's not for me. Like, I don't like it, but I wouldn't expect me to like it. That's fine. But he took that record to task in quite an entertaining, in-depth way, and I thought it was a wonderful piece of writing. But I didn't also come away from it going like, you're a Sleep Token fan who has not liked this record. Like, it was pretty clear that he didn't like Sleep Token. So does that review therefore have less merit than someone who likes Sleep Token giving them a positive review? I don't think it has any more or any less. And as I say, I think it's an imperfect world where you are, you know, where true, pure objectivity is difficult because everyone comes to something with their own likes, their own dislikes.
And you're writing an opinion piece as well, so you need to give a bit of allowance for that. And I totally agree, Sam. I'm not sitting here saying, like, let's make sure we go down and give everybody 1 and 2 stars. I mean, I feel like the same numbness would come across you if you just picked up a magazine, everything was getting slated all the time, whether it came for a pure heart and complete integrity or not. If you just pick up something and everything's getting shat on, I think it's even more damaging than everything being positive. What I'm just saying is neither's good. And in the balance of averages, it was just unusual to see almost identical scores across 4 years for all the big bands when most people would say a few of the albums were duds or not the best. Yet here we have these fucking wall-to-wall scores that everyone's great. I did, for fun, I did look at the Machine Head album for last year because that was a consensus, was a bit of a fucking dud. And I went to a Renfrew referenced a blog that he thought was very good called Heavy Blog is Heavy. So I went and I fished out their review, which started, Machine Head are my favourite band. This is getting harder to defend as years go on. And then ends in its original form, unatoned as an absolute mess, but there are nuggets to be found. And then he gives a sort of description. If you rework the track list, and you can find some solace in this terrible record. The scores for Kerrang and Metal Hammer were 3 out of 5, and Metal Hammer's was 4.5 out of 5. And again, I'm not suggesting for a second that wasn't from the heart writing and journalism, but I mean, even in something that's a sort of consensus dud, cannot get beneath 3.3 out of 5 stars or Ks or whatever it is. And it's just like, my problem with that is if you don't feel like you're getting, that sometimes you're going to read that something is a fucking major label dud, that you're going to start just losing faith in the whole process, no matter how it's put together.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it also comes into a very interesting like conversation now of like this is probably a real tangent to go off. Like, we live in this like post-truth world now where you are looking for your view to be mirrored back to you. And, you know, the idea of like, and I think this is one of the things that publications, you know, have an issue with now, where like their voice is no longer considered like the pure authority in the way that it was maybe 30 years ago. And that's not through any fault of their own. That's just because now if you read a record review or a news story or a political feature and like you disagree with it, the majority of people now are inclined to just go, that person's wrong, like, and they go and find the thing that validates their own prior opinion. So, you know, that puts criticism, I think, as a concept of writing as in a really interesting, like, difficult place. You know, like, I enjoy reading things that like challenge my view and perspective on a record. Like, if I think a record's good and I read a really interesting in-depth review telling me like, here are the reasons that this person considers it to be not good, like I want that. But, you know, I was buying magazines 25, 30 years ago when like that's what I'm conditioned to want. Increasingly, unfortunately, I think audiences want their own view. You know, they want, I like Sleep Token, and if you say that this record's bad, like, you're wrong. Like, I'm going to go and read the review that validates what I feel. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but I think it puts criticism in an interesting place. And to be honest, like, maybe I'm not the person to have this conversation. I hate reviewing. Like, I think I've probably reviewed half a dozen records in the past 10 years because I don't think I'm very good at it. Like, I don't think that's my skill set. I think there are people out there who are phenomenal critics who probably couldn't put together a 3,000, 4,000 word in-depth feature. You know, much in the same way, Gav, that you say you are like a news person. Like, you can do news, you maybe can't do written reportage as well. Criticism is not my thing. I'm just not good at it.
How do you feel, Sam? It occurs to me that there's quite a lot of parallel here between the festival industry and the rock press, in that it's important for me that the next Opeth record is successful so that I can book them to headline Arctangent, and that Mogwai continue to do well. They sell tickets, and you know, if Alexis on Fire release a new album, it's received well, and I have them back at 2003s. Like, my business, my mortgage is actually bound with rock still being a thing. And many times over the last few decades, there's been times where we thought rock was dying and then it comes back. But Machine Head are an important band to certain magazines, probably, I assume. Like, you can't kill Iron Maiden with a bad review, but the sort of next level down of bands, there's got to be an element of, for the magazines to survive and the festivals to survive, we need the top I don't mean the top tier of the Metallicas and the Maidens, but you need like Mastodon to do well and Ghost to do well. And do you think there's a consideration there? Or
well, don't, and you know, again, this probably comes back full circle to kind of like what I loosely kind of like threw out earlier of like, what is the role of publications? Like, you know, what do you provide to your audience? And like, is it not important for every band to like, the role of like, let me figure out how to phrase this. What is, for instance, like Kerrang and Metal Hammer's job within the context of the music industry and the rock music community within that world? Like, is there not a desire for those publications to try and uplift those bands, to give them a platform, to like give them a shot at having a career? Like, is it not better for publications to spotlight, to highlight the things that they think are good, like, and to try to find positivity and good in things? That's not to say that like should come at the behest of like calling a piece of shit when it happens, but like that, though, you know, I think like certainly when like, you know, and I was running Kerrang, like I was very conscious of like, we are part of a community, we're part of a space, and we're part of a conversation and we're part of an ecosystem that, like, for bands to survive and to thrive, and for this music to survive and to thrive, it needs voices that are going to champion it. And for me, like personally, my version of Kerrang, and I think the majority of people's versions of Kerrang over time, is you see yourself as this is a place that we want to champion things, we want to celebrate things.
Yeah.
And if that means that Machine Head get 3 out of 5 rather than 2 out of 5, or any band, you know, like errs on the side of positivity, like, do I think that's inherently a terrible thing? No, because I think there is a responsibility for those publications to, you know, want to uplift and to support and to make sure that there is a rock music industry, there is a 2000 Trees, there is a Metal Hammer, there is the next Machine Head coming through. Like, I do think there is a responsibility to that, and, you know, a passion and a power to that publications, like, you know, rightly defend and hold dear.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on board with all of that. Here's a man who won't be.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the fundamental fracture is in my view of journalism. That is, it's cold and heartless, and it doesn't have consideration of who thinks what. I mean, you get up in the morning, you don't start your day wanting to read about 3 children dying in a car crash, but you're still going to write that story. And that's just where the facts don't care where it takes you, or how they're presented, or how they're received by who's reading them. And clearly there's a different ethos in the music space, and maybe there needs to be. You are the expert in that space. I'm just coming at this from a journalistic point of view. I actually was quite offended with some of when the feedback I got back for the last weeks, where people were saying, you've done this about us and we supported you. And I found that really quite condescending and quite, like, you've came into it for the wrong angle altogether. How could you don't support Damnation, you cover Damnation, and if you either cover Damnation as a legit editorial choice, or you're doing me a favour, and I'm not asking for your favour. So if you're covering it, you might come, and it might be the worst event you've ever been to, and you should write so, and you should say that there wasn't enough seats, and we waited 2 hours for the food queues, and you'll be doing me a favour. Because I take that stuff on board, and then I fix it for the following year, and then fans come and they get a better experience. If you show up at my festival and you've already come with a mindset of, I'm supporting you, well, how can you possibly have any objectivity if you've already started with the foundation of, I'm here to support? And maybe that's just where my definition of journalism and what happens at music journalism are completely at odds. That, to me, it's not about, and a lot of stuff that you've said today comes from a very an editor's position, like financing, presentation, how it's packaged, meeting budget requirements, resources. I done both. I was a reporter who never gave those things a second thought. It was just write the story, hand it over. Write the story, hand it over. And then I was the editor who decided, can we afford that photographer? Can I afford that features writer to be doing that? Because that sub-editor, can I get an extra half shift name? So I've done both of those things as well. But the actual journalism side of it, I don't think any of that stuff comes into any sort of consideration. Present the facts as they are, and it will go. What will happen? What will happen? So I agree that from your point of view and from that is probably what's going. That's maybe where the bee in my bonnet is. That I should look at this type of journalism with a very different set of glasses on.
I think it's still Disney. I think it's about, as I say, it's a balancing act, and I think that I mentioned in an email to you when we first spoke that the thing that I felt was missing from that conversation you had last week was the audience. Like, you are there to serve your audience. What do the audience want? What do they come to you for? And
again, that's an editor's. Not as a journalist. Not as a journalist. You're not there to serve the audience at all. The audience should play no fucking part in it whatsoever. You're there to present the fact. If Manifest collapse,
of course you're there to serve your audience. You're there.
The editors to bring a product together and present, and maybe more of the business thing, but as an actual journalist, so. But again, it goes back to my point. Who wakes up in the morning and says they want to hear about kids getting cancer? No one. Who wants to hear about a disaster in India where 52 people died? No one wants to read that, but they'll all read it because that's what's actually happening. Now, you don't want to read. You might not want to read about. We'll go back to Nazi and nonce. The drummer was some sort of Nazi in a band, but you will read it because it's the truth. And the reporter who's doing it, the journalist who's doing it, shouldn't really be putting into their mind, oh, well, how will this be received by the person? Just fucking give me the facts now. Decide.
No, you're not talking about how it's received. You're talking about, like, is this of value to the audience? Is this what the audience wants to know?
Yes.
The considerations that you had at Paisley Gazette, is that the name of the title?
Yeah. Paisley Daily Express, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when you're sitting there going, I don't want to sit and write about this murder that happened or this, awful thing that happened to this thing. You did it because you were in servitude to your audience. We feel the audience need to know this, want to know this, and we're going to present it to them, the information that we have and have collected. But of course, it's completely wild to say that the audience is not at the heart of this thing, at the heart of any journalism. You are there to serve your audience. And if you're not serving your audience, you're fundamentally doing it wrong, whether you're writing about hard news, features, reviews, whatever it is.
You're doing it by default anyway. I mean, if you're doing your job right, you're doing it by default. I mean, you're presenting fair and balanced and accurate reporting of whatever the situation is, and you're putting it out there. It's you shouldn't be in your mind as a journalist. You don't go into first think about how many clicks you're going to get for this, because we might as well all just talk shit. We might as well write comics. You know what I mean? Because I tell you how you're going to get more clicks.
That's not what you're going. You're not going into it going, how many clicks is this going to get? You're going into it saying, is this thing that I'm going to cover, report on, write about, is this of interest to the audience?
As of interest. Well, I think yes, definitely as of interest, but I still don't think that the journalist point of view, I think as a business, as a marketing director, as an editor, as a fucking, I don't know, the digital team, they're like, right, okay, how do we serve the audience? Basically, it's especially the reporter, there's so little control of what you do when you hand it over. I mean, the sub-editor destroys it. Disney put a picture of it, there's no caption, puts it on page 18 when you thought it was going to be the front page. You've got no control over that anyway. It's a decision that gets made above your head. So, but you've had those decisions to make, which is why I'm saying the difference in my view of how things went from the jump from chief reporter to editor was night and day. I started thinking about budgets for the first time in my life, or who even the audience was. I never sat for a single day wondering, is our audience age group for 18 to 27-year-old men? The first day as an editor, it was one of my priorities to find out. You know what I mean? That was different. And you've sat in these seats for so long, you're probably not looking at it for your first day as a journalist sitting there, right, I'm just going to go and get my exclusive on Metallica, whatever I'm going to do.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not sure what the point was within that.
The point is, we disagree a bit in that, but it's okay. Listen, there was a few things that I was really miffed about long before this was a podcast idea, and long before that kind of maybe set me off in my view of music journalism in the UK. I wanted to know why Temple's Festival collapse 48 hours beforehand, why 15, 16, 17's full European band, the bands had their whole European tours upended, why where the money went. I wanted to know why fans never get refunds. That happened in 2016. You would have been involved with Kerrang at the time. It was the biggest story on the internet. People were going fucking mental about it. What was the decision process at Kerrang not to touch that story?
I'll be honest, I don't even remember that story. That's going back a long way. Not saying that not saying that I wasn't aware of it at the time. I couldn't say.
And I'm not
10 years
I'm not going to sit here and play gotcha with you, but at the same time, then a year after Heavy Scotland collapsed, after a year with Arch Enemy and Behemoth, so we'll not talk about just local shows here. Again, thousands of fans talk about like no getting money back. Then, I mean, an incredible story of Manorfest that tried to come out and be Bloodstock with the bands that it was booking and collapsed after 2 years in the bounds. And then Dominion Festival up in the Northeast that tried it 3 times and then collapsed, said they'd get 5% of their tickets get sold. And each time, I would have loved a voice of authority. I'd have loved some insight. I would have loved someone to take those stories by the reins. They were hugely important. They were hugely interesting. Everyone had their own terms of one of those. Again, you can spot when something's going viral because you just look at the numbers involved. And none of the music press in the UK touched it. And I was hugely disappointed when the decision was taken with whatever resources were there over the last 10 years not to tell us why these events collapsed. And we were left with statements from the organisers that have got a vested interest in telling you their version of events.
I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember what happened 10 years ago on any particular story. I would probably say that a lot of these things will come back to this point. What interests you may not interest somewhere else. Someone somewhere has to make the decision of what is the thing that is most interesting to the biggest part of our audience. An audience, say, I'm not sure what Louder or Metal Hammer or Rock Sound or Kerrang, I have no idea what their audiences are at the moment. I imagine their online audiences are millions a week. And that's a lot of people to have to try to pick through the bones of every single story and say what is of most interest to the biggest audience that we can here. That's without getting into any individual specifics. That is what you're facing.
Well, I suppose that's where the good thing with hindsight and experience for me is these stories were the biggest stories of the day. They would get the most clicks for all your fan bases, and that's what everyone wanted to know. And the next time it happens, please make some sort of effort to tackle these, because the reason it's getting shared hundreds of thousands of times with almost no insight is because there's no other platform doing it. So, when festivals collapse, believe me, it's even the smallest. Because Sam, you must admit as well, sometimes you get a hardcore band that no one's ever heard of. I mean, remember that Escula Grind?
Yeah.
And it turned out there was no one had heard of that fucking band. 30 tickets per show, and it was the biggest story on the internet because there was some sort of link to Donald Trump. So this idea that these magazines need to sit down and think, has anybody ever heard of Escula Grind? No, they've not. But a story's a story, and it's interesting when you present it with the facts. And I don't know if the magazines actually did it to him. I've not checked that one out. But that story went everywhere, and it was read by fucking millions of people, and it became quite a household name overnight because people were interested in that story. And it's a bit like, don't just think everything needs to, I'm not saying this about you, but anyone who's listening here, by throwing their fucking mouse at the wall, don't think that it's only interesting if it's Metallica and Download, because it can be the most insignificant band in the world. If the story's the story, the facts will present themselves.
Yeah, of course. I seem to remember that Escuela Grind controversy, like, that probably went as viral or as far as it did, not because of the band involved, but because it hit certain particular trigger points as to what the news conversation was going on at the moment. So, politically or socially politically within that space. So, I imagine the decision to, or the reason that, that particular story went is because it had a Trump line or, there were something within that.
So exactly. Good news is good news, no matter how it comes to be. So please, I'm begging the music journalists of today to go out there and do it. I mean, if I was to pluck one story from there, if I was sitting here, you're sitting nothing to do.
Do you actually think do you think that Escuela Grind thing is a good story then, or do you think that's people cynically? Do you think that's people cynically going, we're going to cover this because this has got a Trump angle to it?
I wasn't
That's what it was.
particularly. I was a lot less interested in that than all the other examples. Again, I'd rather have had the stories about the other examples. But I mean, ultimately, if you're sitting there and there's a business decision on top of it, I mean, you get a grindcore banging out there preaching the ethos of the grind scene, and then they're doing shaking hands with the pals of Trump's behind it. Aye, well, that's interesting enough to me. I will click that click, and I will get some content that I'll read, and then I'll decide myself how I feel about it. But the fact it's there and it was covered is kind of proves my point that you don't need to be the biggest bands, the biggest festivals for anyone to give a shit. I forgot what I was going to say there before, but what I'm going to say is thank you for coming on here and having this discussion with us. I would very much like to end this in more of a proud moments of your career, especially this Metallica picture behind you. Some things you might like to see change going forward, if anything, in music journalism. And I've sort of note of positivity that things aren't terrible.
I think things aren't terrible because I think actually when you look at the quality of music journalism, the quality of writing that is out there now, I always one of the things that really bugs me the most is when people talk about like this golden age of music journalism being in like the 80s and 90s and like, oh, wasn't Kerrang brilliant back in the day versus how it is now, to use that example. Like, believe me, I spent the best part of 10 years sat in front of a wall with every single Kerrang that had ever been published. Some of the things that passed for writing in the late 80s, early 90s was absolutely diabolical. So in terms of like pure quality, I think some of the writing nowadays is like, I think we live in a time where you have access to, I'm not saying every single piece is, but you have access to some phenomenal writers and some brilliant journalism with great quality to it. So I think that is a huge positive that I think we all at various points take for granted. Would I like to see some things change? Yes, like I'd love to see there to be more truly long form content out there to really get my teeth into. I'd love to see that packaged in a beautiful way with amazing access, amazing photography, like real time spent with an artist. Like, I'd love that. Like, I'd love the depth that the New Yorker goes to on a subject to be applied to Knocked Loose. Like, I'd love that. I'm also aware that I'm probably in a great minority within that. But, I do think there is a space for that. I think it's just the challenge is how that becomes what the business model behind that is. Like, I think a lot of the problems that you can talk about music journalism, as I think I said to you in email, like it's the same problems that every single publisher is facing in their business now. Like, how do you survive? How do you monetize? Like, how do you keep this thing going? How do you make sure that you have resources to invest in the next big thing you want to invest into? Do I think people have got that right in the past? No. Do I think the answers are there? They're there somewhere. I think the answer, unfortunately, I think it needs to be solved by tech people rather than by journalists, because it's a problem of distribution and the model. Like, I think again, to go back to something you said last week that I sort of fundamentally disagreed on, and I think I said earlier one side of why I disagreed on it in terms of media's given away its power. The problem that media have is it gave away its product. It gave away its product for free. So what does the business model look like now? And what a familiar story in the music industry. People give away their product to tech companies to scale and build off the back of, and then the people who are doing the work, creating the thing, are looking around going, how do we survive? Like, that's not publications, that's every single band that's out there in the world. Like, so I think there are real challenges facing the industry, as there are, I think, everything involved in this ecosystem at the moment. But I think the people are there to do the job better than it's ever been done. We've just got to find ways for them to be able to do it. And I think a lot of that comes down to resource and to being able to do the job to the best of their abilities. So, you know, that's why I ultimately got a little bee in my bonnet about the episode last week, where it was like, it felt like a lot was coming down on the journalists who are out there, you know, fighting the good fight for buttons or less, I think is how I described it to you on email. And
Yeah,
actually, and that's why I think it's important that like someone like me comes on this to argue it, because
absolutely,
sure, blame me,
absolutely.
like I'm the person that made some of those decisions.
I feel that it was entirely missed in any of the complaint emails that I received. Was that I stressed at length on the first one that I believe they're talented writers, hardworking, and I feel like maybe the copy approval and then the sort of ad buys bit skewed the whole thing. That bit it was never said, and I never said they were talented, they were important.
No.
Or
I wasn't saying that you said that they weren't in any way. I'm just saying, like, that's ultimately what I'd like to see. But you know, ultimately, I'd also like to see a return for the demands of those things, right? You know, I'd love there to be enough people out there banging the drum to say, I want to read 10,000 words written by someone who spent a week in the back of the van with the next Not Loose or Code Orange or whatever. Like, I'd love to see that. I don't know if that demand is there, truly. Like, I don't know. Like, our brains have been turned to mush by social media. You know, all of the signs I think out there at the moment are not saying the demand is there to support that kind of journalism, but I'd love that to be the case.
Yeah. Well, look, Sam, I just want to say a massive thanks. I hope that when your WhatsApp groups are blowing up tomorrow, that people feel that this episode is a more balanced view, and that there's, well, it's like the Gav side and your side have been equally represented, because, you know, it felt like people thought we were trying to give everyone a kick in for no reason last week, and that wasn't necessarily the intention. The other thing I'd say is that when we have guests on, it's normally a lot more fun, and I want to hear I want you to come on again in the future, because I feel like you must have a billion stories that haven't been told that you probably can tell some without naming.
They're like, the journalist in me won't let you leave until you tell me what it was like to spend 2 days in a van with Metallica or a bus, or like give us a snapshot of what it's like to be on the road with Metallica.
So I'll give you a snap. I'll tell you literally that photo that is behind. I'll move my head so you can actually see it. So this was taken in one of the more colourful districts of Bogota, Colombia, which upon our arrival, our plane was diverted because the weather was so bad in Bogota that we couldn't land. There were then like flash floods through Bogota, so it made the whole thing an entire disaster. The full plan of the time was to do this photo shoot in this very colourful area of Bogota. All the houses are like painted yellow and pink and green and blue, and it's amazing, but it is, you know, what they would consider to be like a dangerous part of the city. And it was pouring with rain to such an extent that as we were waiting to go to this area, the tour manager said, we're not doing this, like, look at the weather outside. And it was agreed that the decision would be made by Lars Ulrich, would have the final word on whether they were going to do this. To which Lars came down to the hotel lobby and looked out the window and said, it's only a bit of rain, like, let's fucking go and do it. So we all bundled into our cars and went into this district in Bogota. The thing that you don't see from this photograph, if you were to turn the camera around directly behind you, behind where the photographer Paul is stood, you would see half a dozen incredibly highly armed private security, one to a person, to look after Metallica in this area as very rich men and potentially like high profile kidnap targets, I suppose. So we had like a full security, you know, machine gun carrying security detail, who I would say made it incredibly clear to myself and Paul that they were there to look after the band. And if if push came to shove, you guys were on your own. So yeah, it was an interesting time, and yeah, by the time this photo was done, there's probably a crowd of like 100 to 150 people who have gathered round, many clutching Metallica records and T-shirts, as word had spread around the city that Metallica were just walking through their streets having photographs taken. So yeah, it was just a fun little insight.
Amazing. Love it.
And the first time James has smiled this whole podcast. It's like
first time James has relaxed this whole podcast.
I like
look, so,
the
Sam,
idea.
we will invite you on again in the future.
Yeah.
I think it would be fascinating to get a bit more of your story that wasn't quite such a challenging thing. But so we did give you a warning about this, but we do an on the record at the end of each episode where you can pick any song. Doesn't have to be on brand for you or us or anything, just something you like.
So I will go to a band called Rocket, who I think are phenomenal, who it was my record of the year last year. I don't know why more. I mean, they've had plenty of coverage. It's not that people are like blind to this band, but I don't understand how people aren't falling over themselves for this band. They put a record out last year called R is for Rocket on Transgressive. If you like 90s leaning kind of alt rock, power pop, kind of like, you know, latter day Husker Du into like Sugar, kind of Bob Mould era, Smashing Pumpkins, Silver Sun Pickups, that kind of thing. The record is amazing. If you want a song, you can have Act Like Your Title. They're touring in the UK at the moment. They played their first show last night, Tuesday, so 2 nights ago when this comes out. They're playing in London and a few other places like over the coming days. So go and see them if you are a loose end. I think they are genuinely like brilliant if you like that corner of the rock world.
Amazing. Sounds like something I would like. I will have a listen. I'm going to go for, well, look, I try not to book bands for 2000 Trees that I would have sat as a 20-year-old at university listening to, but every so often I get tempted to just spend my business partner's money on bands I like, so fuck everyone else. So this is a song by the band A. They have played 2000 Trees once before on the main stage, but it didn't feel like the right place for them. So this time they're going to play nighttime set in the forest. And I think the problem with A is a lot of people know A from their big hits, which are on their third album, like Nothing and Starbucks. And for me, the best stuff is the first 2 albums, so people should go and check that out. The song I'm going to choose is quite appropriate. Is called Old Folks, and the irony is that it is a song written by young people observing older generations losing their relevance. So here I am booking a band that may or may not still be relevant for my festival that's supposed to be relevant. But I fucking love A. I love A. And like, if you're a 2000 Trees goer and you're thinking, who the fuck are they? You should go and check the song out. It's great.
Yeah, I can confirm that James does indeed love A. I watched A with him at the Download pilot when we were coming back out, and you were the happiest man in town. So I'm going to get a wee bit nostalgic too. I have been in a bit of a Deftones kick this week because I'm gearing up to go see them again on Friday. I had a wee peek at some of the set lists I've been playing. Everyone knows sort of more modern day, super cool Deftones, but I don't feel like Adrenaline gets the love that it deserves. I think there's some absolute bangers in there. Bold, Engine Number 9, and the track that seems to have survived all these years later to be on the set list, which you'll probably hear if you go see them, 7 Words. It's raw Deftones, it's young Deftones. I still think it can trade blows with the more polished stuff, with the White Pony and Diamond Eyes, right up to Private Music. It's a different type of Deftones for anyone who's not went and dug a wee bit deeper, or from wasn't even fucking born by the time this album was released. So 7 Words is my choice. It's a rager. Go and check that out too.
Good.
Sam, it was a pleasure, sir. Genuinely, thank you for coming.
We can do another 6 hours of this another time if you want. Not sure if
I was talking to you about John.
There's a demand for that. I don't know if your audience would demand that. I don't know if you've looked at the data.
We've never had the complaints yet. I would talk to you for another 6 hours about journalism, no problem whatsoever. I apologise once again for any hurt caused. I'm not here to be controversial. I'm not here on this podcast to be a journalist. I'm not on here to hurt people's feelings or bring people down, but I am offering my honest opinion as I see it. And again, if there was any hot cause last week for fucking friends of mine involved in this, that I go to festivals and sit and have pints with, that's not my intention. I know I can be a bit rough around the edges. I hope that Sam has done your side proud. I feel like you've done the music journalism side proud. Great discussion today. Anything else you want to say to send us off? Fuck you, Gav. Whatever you want. It's all yours, Sam.
No, nothing. I got nothing. Look, I think it's a endlessly interesting conversation. Nothing interests me more than like picking the bones over media and where this is all going. And ultimately, it's good that we are 3 people, and that clearly the responses to your episode last week suggest that the world is out there that wants a healthy rock music media to support and to invest in. So I hope that industry survives and continues to thrive, and that the people who are out there doing really good work can continue to do the really good work that they do and be seen and championed for doing so.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
Thanks again, James. I will see you next week, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.